Phil Devanza, Selectman.
Richard Meany.
John Heichel.
Kayla Breck, Recording Secretary.
Tim Redmond, Chairman.
Brian Hanson.
Barbara Griffin.
Mark Warden.
Simone Duhamel, alternate.
Thank you, everyone. It looks like we have a full quorum tonight, a full voting quorum, so you will not be voting tonight.
Right.
Simone, thank you. Okay, the first item is the minutes of April the 26th, 2012. Copies were mailed or online, depending upon how you get them from the planning department. Anybody have any corrections or changes?
No, I read them and,
Motion to approve.
yeah. Second.
Motion by Barbara Griffin to approve, second by John Heichel. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The chair votes, Phil is abstaining.
Two. I wasn't.
Brian is also abstaining.
Yep.
I didn't see you raise your hand, I was listening for an audible.
I did as loud as I could.
Okay. And the chair votes yes. What was the vote?
502.
Okay. Also, under action items, we have an email from Bill Connor listing issues to be addressed at the Burger Time Food Truck to be located at King's Bowling Lanes. There was copies distributed in your packet. There was some other information, I believe, on the table. Brian, is that correct?
Well, the
Something newer?
email was distributed on the table. The information was distributed in your packet and is on the agenda after the first item, so it'd be the second item on the agenda.
So do you want to let this go for now until we get to the regular agenda?
Yes.
Okay. Couple minutes here, we'll just cover the correspondence. We have a Town and City magazine available for anybody who wants to see it. It's here at the front of the table, you can take it home, whatever you want with it. There's an FYI copy of a timber cut permit for Stickney and Holmes, map 9, lot 86. Address is 267 Easton Barton Road. Paperwork is in the folder up here, if anybody wants to see it. There is a memorandum from Scott Bartlett, the assessor, advising us of this timber cut. Brian, is this on any land that, that you know of that is under covenants from a subdivision approval?
I'm not aware of any.
So that means you don't know or you didn't look?
I'm not even aware of what that timber cut is regarding, so
Well, it was in the folder that you gave me, so I just figured you knew what it was.
Patty usually does that folder and leaves me out of it.
Well, I would suggest that the planning department look at this intent for timber cut and make sure that it's not part of any approved subdivision that has restrictions on timber harvesting or anything as part of the subdivision approval.
We'll do that.
If anybody has any interest in it, there's a copy of it at the table. There's a newsletter from Southern New Hampshire Planning. And there's a copy of a letter from Southern New Hampshire Planning regarding the Southern New Hampshire Planning actives and opportunities. Copies were mailed and distributed, so it's a whole bunch of stuff from SNHP. If anybody's interested in discussing it, you can look it over in your packet and we can talk about it at the end of the meeting if anything comes up that people want to talk about. All right, with that, we will we'll begin the meeting officially, because we have new rules that we don't wait till 7:15 any longer. So we will start the meeting immediately.
The rules and procedures aren't quite yet adopted, but we have set it up on the agenda so that it doesn't have that time on the agenda.
So what would your preference be? To start or go by the old rules?
No, we can go ahead.
Okay, we have no old business tonight. We only have new business. Map 3, Lot 28, it's a time extension and subdivision plan amendment hearing for a conditionally approved open space subdivision plan of the Anna King Trust, care of Richard Joyle, Kennedy Hill and Shirley Hill Road, map 3, Lot 28, zoned agricultural. The applicant is requesting a time extension to meet the conditions of approval. The board previously granted a time extension that is scheduled to expire on May 27th, 2012. In addition, the applicant is asking for an amendment to the conditions of approval to allow conditions A, whatever those other things mean in the
Aye.
II, triple I, IVF, to be conditions subsequent. This will allow the bond and development agreement of the subdivision covenants and restrictions declaration, as well as the homeowner bylaws to be imposed when the development is ready to be constructed rather than required prior to the planning board signing the plan. So Brian, can you explain that briefly, what we're trying to accomplish here tonight?
Yes. Essentially, they're here for a time extension. That's a fairly easy one. I don't know that I need to go into a whole lot about that. The extension would be granted to May 28, 2013, as it currently expires on May 28, 2012, a few days from now. And the second request is essentially geared more toward being able to allow the development to get finalized and get recorded, and allow Mr. Joyle to do what he's been planning on doing all along, and that's to sell the property off to someone else who would develop, who would eventually develop the land. So the reason for the amendment request is essentially to not require the bond up front prior to getting the planning board to sign it. That's originally how the conditions of approval were listed, so that the bond would be a condition precedent final approval. And there's other examples in town of developments that we have not followed that procedure with, and so I think doing this would not be inconsistent with town policies or practices. The other two things would be the capital improvement, the development agreement and the declaration of bylaws. It's written on the condition as a condominium declaration of bylaws. It really should be homeowner declaration or, HOA documents, because they're not condos, it's gonna be homes. But essentially those would be documents that are also more geared towards something that the developer themselves would be filling out and signing versus the applicant here tonight who would sell it off to that person. We've been in discussion with the town attorney, and he said that the way that his current development agreement is written, it was written for a larger development in another community and kind of tweaked a little bit when Steve Griffin was here, so he was using something that had been basically written and geared towards another development, which was a little more intensive a development, a larger development that had maybe 40 or 50 lots versus this, which has 9 lots, including the existing house lot. So, the development agreement, there's language in there that requires the bond prior to, or at least completion of the roadway prior to any finalization of the project. And so that's language that he thinks could be taken out, and we can work with the town attorney. Once the planning board makes a decision tonight, we were going to go back to the town attorney and have him redraft that development agreement to be more in line with this amendment as proposed. So,
Brian, when were these plans conditionally approved? What year?
they were approved back in 2009. It's May 28th of 2009 was when it was conditionally approved. The towns granted them, big time extensions since that time. So I think two or three time extensions since that time. And they've met most all the conditions of approval. It's really just these legal documents that are kinda hanging out there that still remain to be, addressed, and then the bond issue. And then, you know, if those things can be determined to be conditions subsequent final approval, then we can go ahead and get the plan signed, recorded, and on the books, and then, essentially, he would be able to move forward and sell those lots off to a developer.
My question is, why haven't these plans been signed yet? What's been the holdup?
Well, it's exactly what I've just said, the bond, putting up the bond for the project is one of the
Have we heard
conditions,
about this before?
one of the conditions of approval.
Have we heard about this problem with the bond and on the past three time extension grants?
I think that has been brought up, that, you know, that was a remaining condition of approval, and they were essentially saying, well, we can't come up with that money right now, but I don't know that it would have ever come up unless that, the applicant had a developer in hand that could put up that money. So, it might be a question that he can answer better than I, but.
Anybody on the board have any questions for Brian?
Yeah, what's the usual business with the bond? What typically happens in a situation like this in other cases?
Well, typically, the bond is required prior to any building permits being issued. There are certain instances where, you know, the town has required a bond prior to a final approval, but I know that the recent policy has been that the town wait and not require the bond until it's time to actually develop the property. And when the developer comes and says, okay, I want to start building, then they require the bond. Because otherwise, you know, if they put up a bond and walk away, then that bond would, you know, it would have been just given up for nothing, essentially.
I have a question.
Barbara, please.
Just for my clarification, Brian, because I managed to confuse myself reading this, if I read your report, just so I understand what your report says, the only amendment being requested is the A and the things on the first page, if you look at the first page of your report.
Right.
So, and so.
A, II, triple I, and VI-F to be made as conditions subsequent final approval. That's the
Okay.
amendment proposed.
Okay, so if I go to page 2, what we had been dealing with before on this project were extensions on the conditional approval that had been received until all the conditions were met. Under staff review, when you talk about approve requested waivers to the development regs, including 2, 3, et cetera, that's all part of the current existing approval.
Right, what I put under staff review number 2,
Right.
it says original subdivision plan approval is as follows, and then I just copied all of the language out of the notice of decision, and
From
that
the-
was exactly what was approved
On May
back in
20th.
2009 when they got approved.
All right.
So
And-
all the way down through B, condition subsequent, 1, 2, and 3, and that was what the language that was part of the notice of decision from the original approval.
Okay. And so the bold is simply a designation of what is currently approved as being intended to make it something that the applicant can do after the plan is signed.
Right, well, if you look at B, condition subsequent
Right.
on page 3, there's all those 3 conditions, the 1, 2, and 3 that are listed in bold. And then up above that, there are 3 things in bold. Those are the 3 listed on page 2 that I referenced, that the applicant would like to be listed as conditions subsequent.
So B1, 2, and 3 are currently conditions subsequent, is that
Right.
correct?
And those other 3 would become
And
4,
you're-
5, and 6 conditions subsequent.
So 2, 3, it was a little confusing. 2, 3, and F would then become 4, 5, and 6.
Condition subsequent, correct.
So it's not that the applicant is asking for conditions subsequent in the first instance, there already were conditions subsequent
Right, there are some conditions subsequent
as part of the original
as part of
approval.
the original approval, and he's just asking for those ones to be moved from precedent to subsequent and added to the list of subsequent.
Okay. And all of those questions have to do, I guess my confusion is the bond piece, because I didn't understand that any of this language addressed the bond piece that you were talking about.
Number 3, the III, provision of the plan's capital improvements or surety therefore. The surety is the bond.
So that's the provision you were
So,
talking
yeah,
about.
if you put in the actual capital improvements, meaning build the road, then you don't have to put up the bond. But that just kind of seems a little backwards anyway, because the town engineering department never allows any developments to go forward without putting up a bond. So really, you put up the bond, then you do the capital improvements, and that covers, whether, if a project's been started, then the town has the ability to go and call the bond up if they need to go finish it because somebody walks away.
So is that the appropriate language to make it a condition subsequent or not?
You can change it however you want. I mean, this is a requested amendment to the plan, so if you wanted to change it to, bond payment according to town engineer's calculation of, required infrastructure, I don't know what you would call it or how you would word it, but
Okay. A further
Essentially-
question with the chair's permission?
Go ahead.
In your opinion, does this have any regional impact?
in my opinion, no.
Right. And are you aware of any changes in the zoning or development regulations in the community that would have affected the approval of this development?
No, I'm not.
And are you aware of any changes in applicable state regulations that would have affected the approval of this agreement, of this development?
Again, no, I'm not.
Thank you.
So Brian, regarding the bond, is the bond to do with the road construction? Is that what the bond is for?
Yes.
And you're saying that if we change this to a condition subsequent, that they can actually start the road without putting a bond up? Is that what you're saying?
No. They would still be required to put the bond up. However, it would be prior to being issued any permits or being allowed to do any construction on site versus prior to the plan being signed and
Okay.
recorded.
Phil?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused on one issue with that. And I'm just wondering if the rationale to have this in as a condition prior had anything to do with, in the past, we've had issues where people have gone in and they've cleared a logging the access to log the property.
Mhm.
Just so happens to be where the road is gonna go.
Yep.
They just so happen to go in and put down gravel and go in and bulldoze so that they can get the equipment in to get the logs out. And we've had this where basically the road has been roughed in and basically in. And we've had no control over that. And I'm just wondering if this has any effect on it, and if this is why it was done the way this was.
I don't know that that would necessarily inhibit anyone or change how that might occur. Changing the bond, I don't think would change any of that. If a developer comes in to the town assessor and tells them, I want an intent to cut, and they want to go and cut a logging road through somewhere, he's going to give him that approval to do it unless he has some really good reason to not. So I don't know that that would change anything for the logging road portion of it, or where they decide to do the logging road, I mean, I understand what the concern is, that, yeah, they're essentially, you know, cutting down the trees where the road is planned. But if it's according to the logging road standards, I guess, then, I don't know.
They'd have to get a permit from DPW to access the town road with a logging and, landing.
I don't know. Is that?
Nope.
I don't think they have to get a permit from DPW.
Well, they're accessing a public road with a driveway, I
they're
would think they would have to
creating-
get a permit.
If they're creating a driveway, yes, but I think for logging roads, you treat it separately.
They don't have to.
Ryan, do you have something? Thought you were trying to get my attention. All right, does anybody else have any other questions? Otherwise, we'll invite the applicant up. More questions from anybody? Okay, we'll invite Attorney Joyle to come up and make his presentation.
Hi, everybody.
How you doing?
I see a whole lot of new faces since I started this 5 years ago. So I thought I should go back at least to reintroduce exactly where I started 5 years ago, and that was, this property in Goffstown was my aunt and uncle's, and I happened to be the one lucky enough to inherit the responsibility for taking care of it and trying to sell it and doing all of this with it. And one of the first things I told the board when I came in here 5 years ago, we're not developers. We have no intention of developing it. We don't want to be developers. We can't be developers. What we really wanted to do was preserve the character of the neighborhood such that we could control what the place would look like if some other developer came in there and had an inclination to do things dramatically different, to basically, to maybe mess up the place. And we were particularly interested in what the neighbors thought. And the record reflects that there's never been any objection from any neighbor with respect to any aspect of anything that we have proposed doing. And I think because it's a nice plan, preserves the place, and doesn't disrupt what's there, but just takes advantage of the assets of the place with the open space and the streams and the walls and everything else. So we went through the process with some of your predecessors, and we got all the documentation done. We had all the drafts for the documentation associated with what we're still talking about tonight. And the final leg of the final component of the project was to get approval for the road name. So I'm pleased to say that tonight, after approximately 2 years, the name of the road that we wanted to use has finally been approved. So in answer to the chair's question about what's been going on for the last 2 years, basically we've been in limbo waiting to get the name approved. And I don't know if any of you realize it, but John King was the former owner of this acreage. And yeah, he was governor, he was chief justice, and a relatively prominent Goffstown citizen. And he used to call it Connemara Farm. So that was my first proposal for the road name, but it was thought that it was too garbled over the emergency radio, so it was summarily denied. The next set of suggestions were John King Road, Governor King, John W. King. They said no to all that. I tried using John King's mother's maiden name. They said no to that. But finally, I think January, late January, early February of this year, we managed to get approval of the name John King Drive. So at that point, a couple of months ago, Brian and I started to go through all of the pre-existing documentation. And it was evident to me as an attorney that the development agreement that Bill Drescher had written was kind of a square peg trying to be fit into a round hole. And as it turns out, it was really intended for a 3-phase subdivision in Milford. And Bill had drafted the document, and he had handed it over to the town as a template. And basically, it was given to me in its original form. And I tried to modify it slightly to fit the circumstance. But we also realized that there were conditions that were imposed that in the approval process that required us to post a bond regardless of whether or not we were going to develop it, and pay impact fees regardless of whether we were going to develop it. So I met with Bill Drescher 2 weeks ago, and Brian has met with him since, and I understand Bill's intention is to draft something more appropriate to this particular development. And beyond that, of course, we're asking for the extension for another year. I can't believe it's been as long as it has been. And the third part of it was to have those conditions which would ordinarily apply, and I would agree that if we were going to go in there and begin development, then we ought to meet those conditions. But since we're not going to do that, and we'd like to get the plan recorded, and we'd like to be able to market the place as an approved plan, that those conditions be imposed on whoever actually ultimately decides to do the development, if anyone ever does. Maybe it'll never happen, but we'd like to get it recorded and get past the, this phase of it.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Does anybody have any questions for the applicant, attorney?
I have
Bill?
one question, and perhaps it's for Brian, and it's out of place asking the applicant, and I apologize.
That's all right.
You mentioned about working or discussion somewhat with Attorney Drescher.
Yes.
And Brian mentioned earlier about also some discussion with some of this. Is it, and from what you're representing about the character of the neighborhood, I'm very familiar with the area. Is it my understanding that there is a willingness to work with the town attorney to draft language for this?
It's already underway. In fact, that was what I did first. What I did was I sent Bill a copy of the original document with Brian's comments on it, and then I sent him a copy of what I had done to try to rework it. And he read them, and then we met, and he said, this really wasn't what I had in mind when I wrote it, and it needs to be substantially modified. At least, he said he thinks 2/3 of it is not really applicable to this particular development. So what I expect next is, over the ensuing weeks, he's going to have an opportunity, knowing what he knows now, having met with Brian and with me, to draft something that fits so that we can sign it and get it done.
And the town isn't getting the bill, is it?
Well, I don't know. I can't speak to that.
I did, you know, talk to Bill, and, you know, we agreed that it would be appropriate to have them meet together. And, you know, I've got a legal line that I can pay Bill with, but I will confirm, though, that he did talk to me as well, and planned on doing this rewrite of the development agreement, subject to, you know, planning board acting on this in order to do it that way. So, you know, we're not going to have him do it prior and then have the planning board, you know, not agree to do something to make the change. So we wanted to wait for the planning board to vote on it first, and then do the work. So.
But before we go farther, I missed a step here in our process. I need a motion for staff recommendations 1 and 2 before we can even move forward with this.
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Phil, seconded by Bob.
Richard.
Richard, I'm sorry. By Richard. And that is the requested time extension.
Yep.
And the site plan amendment does not have a regional impact, which Barbara mentioned, and that it is ready for complete and ready review. So all those in favor of those motions, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes. Now we're officially back on track. Attorney Doyle, do you have anything else for us?
I was, my own observation was the town actually could use a more appropriate agreement document than the one that came from Milford for a different situation. I think it's a good template, but it's probably way beyond most of the subdivisions that you, on a practical day-to-day basis, deal with. And so, a 20 or 30-page document is probably overkill, and you need something more straightforward, simplified, direct, understandable, and suitable. And then you can manipulate it yourself on your own word processor and make it fit whatever the circumstances are, rather than trying to make this one fit all the ones that otherwise don't fit well with it at all. That's just my opinion.
Thank you, sir. Anybody else have any questions for the applicant before we open the public hearing? Everyone set? We'll open the public hearing. Anyone wish to speak on this matter? Doesn't look like anyone is here to speak on the matter, so we will close the public hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. The next step is to resolve any remaining issues. The issues are what we have to vote on in 6 and 7, correct, Brian?
I didn't hear anything else come up.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion for number 6.
I make a motion that we grant the applicant a one-year time extension to meet the subdivision approval conditions to May 28, 2013.
Moved by Richard Meany,
Yeah, I'll second it.
seconded by Phil Devanza. Any discussion on the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Uh, Opposed? No one's opposed? Any abstentions? No abstentions. Chair votes yes. All right, the next one is the subdivision plan amendments. Do we want to vote on them as a unit or individually?
I think altogether would probably be,
Anybody have any opposition to voting on them as a package?
No.
Okay, so we need a motion for item number 7.
Motion to approve the subdivision plan amendment to make the 3 conditions listed in our sheet as conditions subsequent.
So moved by Richard, seconded by Mark Warden. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes. Thank you, sir. You too. Okay, the next item up is map 15, lot 221, request for a waiver of site plan. I hope I don't murder your name, Celestina Procchio? Priscilla? Close enough. Burger Time Food Truck to be located at King Lanes, Mass Road, Zone Commercial. Brian? Give us a rundown on this.
yes. If I can find it.
There we go.
Okay. Applicant, Celestina Porcello has proposed to put a mobile food truck in the parking lot of the King Bowling Lanes property, and has given us some diagrams of where that would be placed. It's essentially gonna be, there's a separate building on that lot for retail, and I believe maybe a church use as well, that she's proposing to put it just out in front of that building. It would be in front of the parking area that's there, and she's proposed to have that trailer on site, I believe, at all times, and I'll let her maybe speak to that. She would leave it there and just lock it up. Let's see, the reason it's before you tonight is for an application for a waiver of the site plan requirement. Because it's a non-residential use, and because the site currently doesn't meet parking regulations, I can't just make a letter saying, yes, this is an okay change of use, or I'm sorry, no, this is not a change of use and you're okay to go here. I need the planning board to basically either require a site plan or waive the site plan, which is what she's attempting to go for tonight. And, it's not my opinion that a site plan with engineered drawings necessarily needs to be drawn up for a mobile food truck that at any point in time could be, removed from the site. I don't think, drainage and topo and all that stuff needs to be calculated into something like this. But we have looked at parking, existing parking, and currently there's 45 parking spaces on site. It was my calculation that was 10 short of what the required is for the current uses that are on there, including this use that she's proposing, which would require 1 parking space. That was, I think, for the uses that are there and for how full that parking lot typically is, I don't know that parking really is a big issue. It just doesn't meet the current regulations. So I think that waiving that parking requirement could be something that the planning board could do. My report did go out to Bill Connor, and he's provided you his comments. That's what you had on your table tonight, so if you had a chance to read over what you got on your table tonight, and you'll see that. He does list in there a few things that he wants to make sure happens, but it doesn't look like anything that would necessarily, make it a dead project. He lists things like, has to have 6 feet minimum clear space between the parking and the trailer, and that they gotta put barriers in or curbing or something that would keep vehicles from, plowing right into the trailer, because obviously they would have, gas and cooking facility stuff in there, and that could be a fire hazard. Distances between buildings and clear space and things like that are the types of comments that he had. And I think that we could work out an available and a workable space on that lot that they would be able to place the trailer in a workable manner. Putting an exhaust system in and having the minimum clearance requirements to structures. Fuel supply, they need to provide the specs on that.
Well, these are items that you can handle through the
Yeah.
administrative part of this process. We
Yeah,
don't need to,
those,
we don't need to
they
go over all
didn't
of them.
really seem to me like issues that necessarily would prohibit this truck from being placed there, but that they just need to be worked out with the fire department and provide that information. And so,
Is it just
in my opinion, I think the board could easily grant this waiver of site plan, and I don't think it would pose any unnecessary hardship to the applicant, and would not be contrary to the spirit and intent of the regulations. I also believe that specific circumstances relative to the site plan or conditions of the land use, or the land in such site plan, indicate that the waiver will properly carry out the spirit and intent of the regulations. So my recommendation is to approve the waiver of site plan requirement and accompanying parking requirement, and make those 2 findings that I just spoke of. And I'll turn
Alright.
it back to the chair.
All right, there is one issue that we granted permission for this site to have a double-decker bus ice cream truck on this lot several years ago, and that's still a standing approval. I don't think we can have both. I think it's gonna be too crowded if the double-decker bus pulls in and starts selling ice cream while this is here. So we have to consider a previous approval for that lot as part of our consideration tonight.
And that was after a fair amount of discussion,
Oh, boy.
as I recall.
So we would be, in effect, approving 2 mobile businesses on this lot in addition to the structure, if that is a business.
Does the mobile ice cream truck still come?
I don't know, that's the applicant's requirement to tell us, because I see some head shaking no in the back, but officially, they have permits to run a double-decker bus ice cream truck on the property. Phil?
Yeah, so I think one thing that's important that we need to find out, the applicant here is not the owner of the property, and I think the applicant on the double-decker bus might be the owner of the property, so there might be two different applicants,
I'm
just
just-
so that we're aware.
I'm just informing the board
I
that there's a
understand.
previous approval for this site.
The owner signed the application for waiver, though.
Okay.
The owner is aware and did sign it.
Well-
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that,
Was it Mr. La Rochelle that was the applicant?
well, I don't have he's the owner of it, and without having that application in front, I'm only assuming that he was the applicant.
Okay.
I just want to be sure we don't approve too many uses for the site, and then it becomes a nightmare and it comes back on us.
Well, I think also, though, if a use has been discontinued for a period of more than a year, then, I mean, that use becomes an,
I think I'd like to have it in
Oh.
writing from the owner, applicant, that the bus is no longer in use and will not be on the property if we're going to consider granting another mobile use on the property.
I mean, that language is in the zoning ordinance, I believe. If it remains vacant or is not in use for a certain period of time, then
That's not,
that use
I
doesn't.
don't have the information, I just know about the approval. Phil?
The only concern I have about that is what constitutes use? Can the applicant come back and say that that double-decker bus was here last summer for one weekend, and therefore it doesn't go away? So that's something that needs to be resolved and has to be clear so that there's a clear understanding from all parties involved.
Anybody else have anything they'd like to add to the discussion? Barbara?
I have a question on the memo that came from fire today. Did the applicant get this? Because I need to tell you, I don't think that these are just so easy to deal with. And I'm assuming that these are all referenced to a fire code, but I don't know the fire code, but I am going on the representation of the fire department that these are in fact directly related to a requirement of a fire code that we require businesses to follow. But I need to tell you, I don't think these are gonna be so easy to just go on with. My other comment on it did relate to my recollection about the previous approval on the double-decker bus, which I think I would like to know that that right is being extinguished or by the applicant for this. And is the applicant aware of any of the requirements that we have on our regulations for a mobile food truck in regards to, do we have any other regulations in regards to vendor licensing or that type of thing that they are going to have to meet?
It would all be according to state regulations,
Okay.
what they'd be required for, and there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that
Okay.
speaks to that.
All right. And when we approved, I don't even remember if I was on the board, I just remember that this was a big issue, the ice cream truck. I don't remember whether that approval had a time frame on the season that could be operating at the location, but I believe it did. And I don't know what the issue is in regards to whether this is intended to be there. I would like to know whether this is intended to be there
Seasonal or
seasonal
all year round.
or year-round, because I think that impacts how I might feel about parking. Now, I'm not particularly concerned about the parking at this point.
You all set, Barbara?
Yep, thank you.
The other thing we have to also consider is we turned down Phil's Barbecue at the Accelerated Automotive for cause. And they were gonna be required to have a site plan, as I remember, which showed how they were gonna handle traffic and parking and a lot of other things. So just wanna make sure that the new board members know that we've crossed this bridge before and we did not approve that particular application. Any board members wish to speak on the subject?
Excuse me.
John, please.
How many, is this an owner-operator, or are they gonna be, is this owner-operator, or is it employees of? Anybody
Better
tell
look
me?
at somebody other than me for that answer.
Okay.
Either Brian or,
Is it belonging to Kings, or who's
Oh, I-
operating this?
suppose we'll wait and find out when the applicant can
It would
answer that
be-
question, when the applicant
think
does
it'd
their
be-
presentation, John?
I think it'd be owned and operated by Ms. Portillo, who would, I think, lease
That's not really
space
our
from the,
purview.
from the property owner.
Mr. Chairman,
Please, Mark.
yeah, I'd like to disclose to the record that I am an acquaintance of the applicant. We have several friends in common, and I know that's not uncommon in a small town like this, so it's certainly not, it doesn't constitute a conflict of interest. So
I don't
wanted-
know, what's the food like?
I may be your best customer, yeah.
What kind of a deal do you have? No insult intended. Just gonna look at our, okay, so we'll need, item number 1 on the site plan recommendation motion before we can move forward.
Motion to determine that the application does not have regional impact and accept the application for review.
Second.
Moved by Richard and seconded by Phil. Anybody want to discuss the motion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes. So at this point, we'll invite the applicant to come up and identify herself and make her presentation.
Hi everyone, I'm Celestina Portillo. I just wanted to say that I think in this case, the 1 parking space per 200 square feet regulation isn't really relevant since it's a bowling alley that's taking up most of the space, and that, you know, they can't actually be occupied, most of the space in the bowling alley can't actually be occupied by people.
I don't understand your statement.
Most of the bowling alley is filled with bowling lanes that can't actually be occupied by people. So the standard rule for 1 parking space per 200 square feet, to me, doesn't seem relevant exactly in this situation because the occupancy doesn't correlate.
Okay? Everybody understand that statement?
Yes.
Okay, please.
Did you have some questions?
Not yet.
What
I'm
would
just
you?
gonna let you make your presentation and let the board ask any questions.
You can just talk about what you're planning, what the plan is, and how your business is proposed.
You could tell us about what the trailer is, where it's gonna go, that sort of thing.
It's a 6x12 trailer that I've converted into a mobile food truck. The local regulations, I've got a fire suppression system, I've got a hand wash sink next to my 3-bay sink in my little tiny trailer. I'm gonna be selling hot sandwiches.
Where? Where exactly on this, is the trailer gonna be parked?
Let me,
On our site plan, there's a little dark blue area. It's on the small handout here that was
There's some additional attachments in your packet.
application for the waiver.
yeah, it's not an actual parking space, just so you know. So it wouldn't be taking up one of the parking spaces.
Sort of where the pickup truck is on the picture we're looking at.
Do you have experience with a truck like this, miss?
No.
Do you have an expectation of how many cars are gonna be going in and out of there during, say, lunchtime?
I do not expect, I do not plan on actually allowing my customers to park in the site. There's residential, I mean, areas around, there's street parking, and I didn't want to impose on the owner anymore.
Well, that brings up a good point, the street parking. There shouldn't, are there marked spaces on Mass Street, North Mass, or Mass Road here, right adjacent to this property, or are those the turning lanes for Penard Street?
There's no parking on
No
North
parking.
Mass.
So there will be no parking on Mass
There is
Road?
none.
There is no allowed parking on North
But
Mass.
Not on Mass, to be on Henriette.
Henriette's okay.
Henrietta, I think.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
you have
Howard.
conflict with the restaurant across the street, because if you're familiar with that area, certain times of the day, you can't find a parking space.
Well, that's just part of our discussion.
Well, yeah, I guess that's something I'll need to discuss with the owner of the building, whether or not it's okay that I have people park in his lot. It's usually pretty empty. Even when there's a large crowd at night, it's like students and people who don't have, you know, children who don't have cars.
How about hours of operation? We haven't heard anything about that.
We're still in discussion about that, but it will probably be something like 11 a.m. to 9 p.m. or, something close to the hours of operation of the bowling alley.
Okay, we'll have to have that as part of your approval, so when you decide what hours you want to operate, you'll need to submit those hours for approval.
Is there some regulations about that I should be aware of?
I think it should be all part of the documentation, don't you?
It would be very typical for an operation to have as a condition hours of operations, and that way, issues in regards to site use are known and can be controlled. Did you get a copy of the memo from?
I did.
Okay. Because I'm just curious, because it looks like a 6-foot minimum clear space between parking and trailer, and it doesn't look like that would be even able to be met. Just looked on the hand sketch diagram.
When I was going over this, I was actually in New Jersey, but I got the map, and I calculated the space requirement from this picture based on the 96-inch minimum parking space requirement. So this space from the property line to the store should be approximately at least 24 feet. If since the...
Okay, so that 24 feet there is based on the parking spaces.
Right, that's what I based it on.
Okay. And so, the trailer as it's proposed would be 2 feet away, and just so it's pretty clear that the fire department is saying a minimum of 6 feet from the building.
Okay, all I heard about was how far it had to be from the property line.
Well, I guess that's part of why I'm asking this, is I'm hearing a lot of new information came out today, and that we might want more information than the applicant might have realized. I'm just trying to sort of figure out really where we are in light of what's going
I
on
can give you
here.
this, I don't know.
Oh, is this, I'm sorry, I thought you were talking about the other.
That's from the fire
No,
department.
I didn't get this.
Okay,
I
I wanted you to have
forwarded
that.
everything that the planning board got to the fire department so that they would get a head start on reviewing this and hopefully provide some comments back for the board to consider. And that's what he sent me back. So he's essentially wanting those bullet point items to be addressed as part of the approval of the waiver or site plan or whatever you want to call it. If the board approves this waiver, you would be subject to following those items that the fire department's brought up, since it's fire code, so.
And just in follow-up to that, and I know this is the public hearing as compared to our discussion about it, I would be uncomfortable even giving conditional approval, knowing that the only site plan we have is handwritten and on its face doesn't meet the fire department requests that we received. Because we really then have no idea where this is going.
Well, I just want to, I guess, verify, what the board does want on this, I guess, because what the application is for a waiver of the site plan requirement. So, she's come up with, tried to come up with, the minimum information of what she might need to provide you without actually drawing up a site plan. But are you wanting her to draw a site plan and
Well,
show
I
all
don't
that
know
stuff?
of any other application for use of property, even when we waive the site plan, that we don't have something in the file depicting an expression of what is supposed to occur that is a reasonable facsimile. We don't necessarily require grading or
Engineer
wetlands
drawing.
or, traffic studies, but as a zoning code enforcement officer would be hard pressed to deal with anything on a site, and I'm not saying you, I'm talking in general process. If somebody came in with a trailer that was different from what we were approved, you wouldn't really have any idea where it was supposed to be. I'm just looking at it from a planning process. What do we have, and what is our ability to know what is gonna be there tomorrow? And I'm just saying, based on what I'm seeing here tonight, I don't think we have any ability to know what's gonna be there tomorrow, I mean, we know the trailer that's being represented is gonna be there, but we don't have any idea where it would be on the site.
But, excuse me, I can't actually put it there until I get the zoning approval. And until I get the zoning approval and I put it there, I can't do anything else. Like, I can't get any of my licenses, I can't even get my doing business as name. If I were to do that, then I would be technically in Manchester, which is illegal because I'm on a residential property and it's a commercial business. So, I mean, what could I do to provide you better with, I mean, I don't understand.
Are you just looking for maybe a better zoomed-in drawing that shows, you know, exactly where the trailer is gonna be on the site? You know, that shows more detail than what currently is on that plot drawing?
I'm raising it as an issue. I wouldn't wanna be in town hall trying to administer this.
And I have a question.
Please, Mark.
You said that even if we gave the approval, the waiver, she'd still have to comply with the fire requirements, right? Fire code and fire department requirements?
Now, I mean, you know, there may be different ways of addressing those and reducing those, you know, distance requirements by perhaps creating better fire suppression, better, you know, fire system, or, you know, I don't know. I mean, that's questions for Bill Connor to answer, but, you know, the way that they address those issues may be, you know, different than what he's suggesting on that memo. I'm not sure.
Follow-up question on that. Looking at this drawing, which is a good picture of the lot, and the picture, the aerial that we've been provided by staff, do you have that one? Okay. I'm looking at the two of them, and I apologize for not having more direct personal knowledge, because it's one of those sites I drive through, I look at, and then I don't recall specifically, but I'm noting that on your diagram, you're showing the parking going at a straight angle along the side of the building next to the bowling lane. And in this picture, it's pretty clear that these cars are parked actually right where it looks like your proposal for the trailer is. And it also looks like there's like a mailbox or something there, which is part of the whole strange zoning for the site. So I guess I've got your drawing here, where if I look at this actual picture of the building as compared to those cars that seem to be parked where your trailer would go, are you proposing to set the trailer up?
There is a space over here that's not actually a parking space, but this looks very different from what it is today. I don't know how old this picture is, but like that house isn't there
Yeah,
anymore.
the back house I've
You
got
know,
crossed
so
out.
this aerial view might be pretty old, so I think some things are quite different.
Well, they haven't moved the building, have they?
No, but I mean, I believe the parking is a bit different. The closest thing I could say to it, if I could show you, is
Sure.
right here, going lengthwise, where it is not a parking space.
Okay, thank you.
That's where that silver pickup truck is? In the picture, that's where you're pointing to, that's where you want to put the trailer?
I don't think there's anything, it's lengthwise across where those cars are.
Sure, but perpendicular.
That would be the closest thing.
You made a statement that you're technically in Manchester. What did you mean by that statement?
I live in Manchester, so if I were to apply for any of my licenses, I would have to use my residential address.
Oh, I see.
Because it's, you know, I don't have zoning approval to actually put the truck anywhere yet and give it an address.
I wanted to be clear because I thought there was a zip code question or something.
No.
We're not doing that.
Okay, secondly, Brian, why did you decide not to have a public hearing on this application? We're talking about waiving a site plan.
Well, it's my understanding that a waiver of site plan wouldn't necessarily require that. It's an application for site plan review that would require a public hearing. So, you know, in my opinion, the development regulations don't require it if the planning board's going to just waive that requirement. But if they don't waive it, then they have to go through the process of public hearing, site plan, all of that.
Well, I would think that if we're discussing waivers that are gonna have an impact on the neighborhood, that a public hearing would have been an appropriate notice. That's my opinion. Last thing, there's a lot of striping on the diagram of the lot. Does the parking lot currently have striping, or will it be striped as part of the project?
What do you mean by striping?
The parking spaces are denoted in front of your trailer here as individual spots
The lines
in
on
front of the church. And I don't,
Just the parking lots, parking spaces.
I really don't think I see any over there. So I'm wondering if you're representing on your plan that you're gonna provide marked spaces, which are not currently on the picture that I see, unless they're. unless
I
they're
do
there
see
now.
spaces in the picture.
They're faint.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
see 'em.
They're faint, but
They're
they're on
faded.
there.
Anybody else have any other questions? Phil?
Yeah, thank you. Do you have, or do you propose any external propane tanks?
I do have two on the outside of the trailer.
Are there any additional ones that you have?
No?
And in relationship to the drawing, this drawing, looking at which side of the propane tanks?
I mean, whatever side you like, if it's an issue, but it would probably be, sorry, let me think.
Probably the logical side would be away from the vehicles.
Well, I guess the question that I have.
I mean, it's on the short end of the trailer, the propane tanks. It's on like the hitch area.
So it would be facing Mast Road?
Yeah, I believe it would.
Or would it be facing the
Or
building?
it could be facing the building.
Yeah, if this picture is a representation of the trailer, the serving window faces the parking lot, and it looks like the hitch is on the left side of the photograph. Is that correct?
Right.
Which means the hitch has to be up against the building, if this is the actual trailer that
Well,
they're using.
I'm just trying to find out from the I guess that's Barbara's point, is that we have nothing in front of us that tells us where the propane tanks, and we have issues that have been raised about distances,
Well, wouldn't
about barriers, so.
would we
I'm-
allow the fire department to administer all the necessary fire protections as a condition of the approval?
I don't have a problem with that, but I guess the only difficulty that I have is not having something represented in front of me that gives me an understanding of where the propane tanks are, the barriers that are being recommended or required by the fire department in front of us. I would just like to be able to see something along that line to have an understanding of where these things are.
Okay?
What do they mean by barriers? Is this something I could have that's portable?
I would assume they're talking about Jersey barriers.
Or
But I don't-
ballards, they could be ballards or Jersey barriers.
It could be
One of the-
something portable, though? I mean, I don't have to actually make any changes to the parking lot, do I?
Curbing barriers are the concrete stops that they put in front of the wheels. Those are barriers.
Oh, okay.
They bring them and they line them up and they peg them into the blacktop. They're concrete, or that can actually come in plastic now. They don't have to necessarily be concrete.
So I would be needing to make a change to the owner's parking lot.
Yes, you would, because you'd have to meet the requirements set forth by the fire department.
That's what I'm saying. It can't be a portable barrier. I need to actually drill it into
Well,
the
because
pavement.
here's,
Has to be something that if a car rolls up against it, it won't move.
here,
So it needs to be secured.
I'm not hearing anybody opposed to this idea. The problem is, and this isn't your problem in particular, is that there are lots of really, I don't think they're particularly strict, but there are lots of rules regarding things for safety reasons that the fire department administers. So they're the ones that sort of look at plans and make comments. And unfortunately, these just came through today. So you're sort of here getting surprised by all our questions about this.
I'd assume that would be the next step, is getting approval from the fire department. I didn't think it would actually relate to zoning.
Okay, but part of the problem is that we'd like you to go through this, but we sort of need to have some idea of what's gonna happen on the site within the ability to do things. And we don't want you to get too far down the road here with some requirements that maybe you can or cannot meet. Because I need to tell you, I think Selectman Devance's questions about your tanks was not, it was an inquiry knowing that if, just from experience, that if your tanks are outside of the trailer, there are gonna be requirements in addition to the width of your trailer as to how far now those tanks can be to any building or the road or anything else. And that's the concern, and that without some sort of idea of where exactly this is gonna go and meet all those requirements, it may be problematic for you to do, not that we don't want you to do it.
So what do you need me to provide?
Well, I think that's what we're trying to figure out.
I made a couple of notes of things here, we can go over them at the end. I wrote down a couple of things.
But again, regarding the tanks, that has to do with the fire department's request, right?
I think
You
it's a
said
code,
something about the size, tank clearance, and tank protection.
I believe they're code requirements.
Right.
They're not, it's not a request, it's a code requirement in
Mhm.
order to operate. And I
Okay.
think those have to be cleared through the building department, correct, Bill, or Brian?
Yes. I'm not sure how much the building department would get into this.
Because I think they have to issue an actual certificate for them to begin opening it, that they've complied with what the requirements are under the fire department's rules and regulations, which are NFPA, I'm sure. Fire code, yep. All right, well, the propane tank was assessed, and the other thing we have to find out about is the ice cream truck, if it's still an active permitted use, or if they're gonna relinquish their use of the ice cream truck.
It's my understanding that he sold that a couple of years ago. But I mean, I understand you mean that he still has the right to put one there if he wants, right?
Another one or
Is that-
something.
Well, I think we'd have to actually file a document that would say that they're relinquishing that. Barbara, would that be the correct procedure?
Well, I mean, I think you can make a condition of any sort of approval you do. I guess the other thing that I had a question about was the season, was it seasonal or year-round use that we're talking about?
I don't know, I wasn't acquainted with him when this was there. It was, I think, a few years ago.
No, I
business.
meant for you.
Oh, for me, no, it'd be year-round.
Any signs?
Yeah, I did, I understand that I need to have approval for signs, that I can have a logo 10% because you don't actually have a rule for food trucks. It's going based on what signs you can put on a building. So I can cover 10% of the food truck with a logo. And then I need approval for an A-frame, is that right?
Yes.
Hmm?
Yes.
Yes.
So if this is gonna be year-round, do we have a site plan on this for snow?
I think this goes back before site
File
plans,
on
because
this
King Lanes
Pretty
and this church
sketchy.
are all
There's not much in the
grandfathered
file.
applications.
No,
Didn't,
This was that property that was supposed to be all taken over by CVS, and I think that's old news, so I think they would have had to
Mm-hmm.
come up with some new stuff. I think this is old grandfathered parking, and we don't have anything in place for snow removal. Bill?
we had a site plan for King Lanes. Then King Lanes bought the adjoining property, came to the Board of Selectmen and requested them to be merged. And at that point in time, once they were merged, the existing site plan was not a current site plan as the merged properties. It was a site plan prior to the merger. The applicant is correct about parking stripes, because parking was required by the planning board at time between the two buildings. But there's been a time that I've been off the planning board, and I don't know what's transpired between those two times. And this combination of when the two properties were merged together for the purposes, they were merged together because it was a single owner. So they received one tax bill rather than two tax bills at the time, was just prior to the CMAC project in Bernardville, which included the width expansion and the inclusion of the third lane. So it's not that far back. So I think planning needs to do a little bit of research to see what's transpired between that point in time.
Okay. I'll try to look back and see if there's any other folders
Because
maybe.
since that point in time, I'm noticing on here, the third piece of property, the residential house was purchased, and it appears that that's been merged. So there's been, of what I appear here, there's been 3 mergers of the property since the CMAC project went in.
Anybody
Well,
else?
that raises another question, because I don't know under what operation you merged the property, because since then, there's been a case that the requirement to merge non-conforming lots by the, with the same owner of record was invalid.
So it was a requirement that the owner came in with the request for the merge. It was a voluntary merge. It wasn't anything that was,
All right,
the applicant was, the owner was subjected to.
all right.
It was a requirement. He came into the Board of Selectmen and requested that the 2 of them be merged into one, because he was getting 2 tax bills, so they got 1 tax bill. And subsequent, as a result of that, the existing site plan on the King Lanes, you can't, it's
Right, it
really,
only
is
goes to
gone.
that, it only goes
So-
to that line.
Most of what I found in the file was regarding the CVS proposal that had been proposed, but, I mean, I can go back.
Well, I
and-
can work with you because it goes into
If it's
CMAC, and
other,
I,
if it's
there
other
are-
map and lot files, then that, maybe that's why I didn't find it.
there is probably a file in some place that's 2 inches thick on this, during the CMAC property.
Brian, is there an actual request for the waivers in our packet signed by somebody?
Yes.
It's signed by both Celestina and
It looks like this.
Mr.
That's the waiver,
That's the waiver request
Augustine.
form.
and it's all properly filled out, Brian?
Yes.
Any more discussion? We need to have a consensus from the board how we're gonna proceed with this. Are we gonna table it until we get more information, or how do you wanna handle it? Have anything to say?
Well, yeah, I think that it would be nice to see Ms. Priscillo make some progress on the stuff that she was just presented with today. I think that's really important to all of us.
What exactly do I need to do?
The list of, the list of comments that
From the fire department?
from the fire department, they're important. They're important because it involves the layout of where you're gonna put your business and its proximity to other structures on that property. And considering that what you're asking us for is a waiver for the application of the site plan in regards to the parking spot, it's important. It's really important.
Of course, okay.
You don't have to do it now. I'm not saying this isn't, I think that when we're talking about how we should move forward,
So you just need more exact measurements? Is that
Well-
what you're saying? I mean, because the exhaust system's on top.
You mean, are you trying to say, Brian, I'd like to see a drawing that demonstrates compliance with the measurements the fire department has asked for?
considering the information that you were just presented with,
Mhm.
I think it's probably going to change the layout that you've presented so far. I think something a little more specific that satisfies these comments would be easier for us to have a clearer discussion about. You know, the
Okay.
guidance I'm trying to give you is how to move this forward. And I think that these need to be satisfied. These are very serious. Does that make sense? Is
Yes,
everybody-
I mean,
everybody in
the
agreement with what I'm
last
saying so
thing
far?
I can't do until I get my fire inspection,
Okay.
right? I mean, I have to get an activation test, which I guess that means that my trailer's gonna get filled up with foam, and I'm gonna have to
Maybe.
refill my tank. Is that right?
You know,
Um,
I've started up a lot of businesses in my life, and you learn the darndest things when you do what you got to do. But it's our responsibility and this board to make sure that things are done in a proper way for lots and lots of reasons. Safety's one, of course, and we want to make sure that this is well thought out and that the necessary authorities in our town are satisfied. Do you
Sure,
understand?
I just need you to tell me like exactly what I need to do, so
It's-
next
it's
time I
hard
come
for-
back here,
It's
we
hard
can have
for
a
me to tell
vote.
you exactly what to do.
Well,
A
Yeah, we gotta give her some direction. We
A
can't just-
suggestion might be, and this board is quick to tell me when they disagree with me, so let me give this a shot. I think that you just heard that we might have, we want to see something that has where your trailer is going to go a little more specifically, all right? I'm not hearing anybody saying you need to do a site plan, but what I'm hearing is that in light of this, that maybe what you need to do is go out with some actual measurements in the fire department so that you know exactly where your trailer is going to fit.
You can get a plot plan from the town and draw it on the plot plan.
And draw it on the plot plan, and maybe request that we continue this to the next meeting, and I know you're trying to get this done, but anything that, and so when you come back with another drawing that's very similar to the type you have here, we can approve the waiver of the site plan, because we know that this is really where we're going, and then we can approve your application.
So you're suggesting this is unacceptable the way this is right now, and she needs to move this blue mark to somewhere that's,
We've got a fair understanding that that is gonna work. I don't
You need a more detailed plan.
I don't need a more detailed plan. I'd like to be sure that the plan as to where the trailer is going to go,
Satisfies.
And meet all the
requirements
requirements.
right here.
not the suppression one, but that you meet the 6 feet back and the 10
Right.
feet back. Because let's just say, for example, with the LP tanks, and I don't know the first thing about an LP tank, all right? Let's just say that the fire department says you don't have enough clearance between the street and the building to put it at this angle. So you need to put it on the side of the building by Henrietta Street. Now, I don't think you want to do that because you want the frontage on Mast Road, but let's just say that that's where you end up putting your trailer. That would be so different from the drawing we have now that it would be really hard for the town or abutters to know what is going on the site. That's all we're trying to say.
All right, time out. Derek Horn has to be recognized. I'm gonna recognize Derek
Yeah,
Horn to
okay.
come up and speak to the matter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Why don't you grab a chair if you wanna sit down, Derek?
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. It sounded like there was some concern about the double-decker bus no longer being there or being there. Could Ms. Percillo operate under the conditions imposed by the double-decker bus if it's no longer there, and work administratively with the building department and fire department to satisfy their concerns with a report back to the planning board rather than to continue the matter and bring it in? Because I'm sure she wants to get her conditions satisfied so she can start the food licensing and all those conditions. And if she could meet any conditions by the double-decker bus, that would give her an alternative route. I mean, you could still continue the application on the waiver, but it would give her a chance to work it administratively with the fire department.
Correct.
We're gonna have to look at what the approval was for the double-decker bus. That may have been represented as a mobile vehicle that was gonna be leaving the lot regularly, where this is not. This
And
will be a
it just-
stationary product.
Absolutely, Mr. Chairman, and it gives her the opportunity, though, that if there wasn't anything too restrictive in there that she can work with, she can at least get up and running for the summer, she can get her license started, and then if there is a condition of seasonal, in the meantime, you've continued this application, she could come back and modify as need be, and you could do a public hearing if need be.
Yeah, may I?
Brian?
Derek, I like what you're thinking. The subtle difference is that the double-decker bus didn't have a cooker inside of it, it didn't have LP tanks, and it didn't probably have the same safety specifications that the trailer does.
Absolutely,
You
but
know?
the double-decker bus, I assume, had an engine and a gas tank in it. So there was a similar, my guess is it had coolers, it had some type of electricity running in it to, whether it was, if they ran a line from King's Bowling Lane, and that's where I'm suggesting that be dealt with the fire department, because those are fire codes, that if the fire department's not satisfied with it, then they're not gonna issue the life safety permit.
But it's not the same thing. I mean, everything parked in that parking lot has a gas tank and an engine.
Yep.
There's a presumption of the level of safety for everything with 4 tires on it.
Yep.
I don't think it's the same for a trailer, though, with the LP tanks. And we certainly don't have to put the barriers and things like that around cars, which basically a double-decker bus basically is. So I don't think it's the same.
Okay. Just a suggestion and an alternative.
Phil?
Yeah, I mean, Brian brought up an excellent point. I mean, I'm familiar with the double-decker bus, okay? There's a little difference between the double-decker bus selling ice cream in the summertime and a year-round operation. The amount of traffic, outside of the issues that you mentioned, but I guess the concern that I have that needs to be addressed, okay, as to, at least addressed, are parking issues. I see a completely different type of parking issues between a double-decker bus and this operation. And the reason is the double-decker bus basically operated in the summertime on the weekends, was when it was predominant, okay? You have Ollie's Restaurant across the street. And I don't know how many people in this room and how many people on TV are familiar with Ollie's. If you try to go to Ollie's for dinner, they have Thursday night, which is a special. People go there from 4:30. There's a line to get into Ollie's. Their parking lot is full, Henrietta Street is full. Overflow parking goes into King Lanes, whether anybody wants to accept it or not, but it happens. It's a reality. We're gonna have an issue here, okay? And it needs to be addressed. And one concern that I have is a lack of a public hearing for the people who live in the area. That's the least that I think the consideration that we can give the people who live in this area, the people who frequent the businesses that are in this area. Bringing up the point that the chairman brought up about how the rib cooker, or whatever his name was, that
Phil,
got-
it was Phil's Barbecue.
the barbecue place was, okay? I just have a concern that it needs to be addressed one way or another. And I think it's a responsibility of this board to address that, and at least give the community that opportunity.
Can I just mention also, regarding the public hearing issue, the town did follow this same procedure with the Barb's Coffee Plus ice cream request when they wanted a waiver of the site plan requirement to do the extra ice cream use in that building. They didn't have a public hearing with that. It was same thing. They came, they put their waiver request form in, paid their $25, and, you know, it's a totally different fee, it's a totally
Well,
different process
I would
set up.
disagree with that, Brian, to the
There was an
effect that
existing
they had,
business that was
they went into
relocated.
an existing building with there. This is something new that we're adding to an existing site, so I think it's apples and oranges. Barbara?
Well,
Nothing, it's, in my opinion, it is apples and oranges. If you were in a butter or, either residential or a business owner, and you have both in this neighborhood, and we have an obligation to both. If I have a building there and it's licensed for a commercial use, I know that at any point, a commercial use might be going into that building. If it's a residential, I know a residential use might change, and I may or may not hear about it, because as long as it's consistent with the zoning and what's somewhat related to what's gone on there before, it's going to occur. That is very different from coming out and finding a mobile structure for business put on a site. I'm not saying it's not appropriate and it shouldn't happen, but it is a very different thing.
Well, I would say then, if the planning board wants to require a public hearing, that they require a site plan, but that it waive engineered drawings or something. I just want to make sure that whatever process we're following it consistently, and, you know, when we waived the site plan on the other one, we didn't do the public hearing. So if you're gonna take this application and waive the site plan on this one, then I don't think the public hearing should be part of it.
We did not waive, we
wanna-
did not waive the site plan requirement for the barbecue guy. We were gonna, they were gonna have to show parking and access to and from the road and a lot of things. They were gonna have to have, porta-johns on site and where they were gonna be located. There was a lot of issues, and then there was the issue of being too close to the neighbor, so this is very similar to the application for the barbecue trailer that was gonna be over on Mast Road. All right, well, let's try and move forward here.
Yeah.
At this time, the board needs to decide how we're gonna proceed with this. We may let the applicant decide how she wants to proceed with this. But there are questions, the propane tank locations, which are a fire department issue, the current status of the ice cream truck, a more specific plan drawn on a larger size plot plan which shows that the trailer will physically, dimensionally fit in the area that you represent it, meet the setback requirements from the fire department and the town for setback requirements. Parking issues were talked about, and a public hearing was talked about, so the board needs to decide what we're gonna do with this. Would you like to come back with more information and not have us make a vote on it, what we're gonna do tonight?
You know what he means by that?
I mean, you're all probably gonna vote no, so I should say yes,
No, no,
right?
hold on. Do you understand what he means by that?
Like, vote now, or
Well,
like
no.
allow me to come back with more information.
You've heard what we've asked for, I believe. Did you take any notes of what we asked for, or did you, or let Brian give you a synopsis?
No, I understand everything on this list, a more detailed plan where the tanks are gonna be, which I did explain to be facing towards the building. But you need that in a more detailed plan, right?
That is for the fire department, but it should be showed on some sort of a plan, so the fire department can look at it and say, yes, this meets our requirements, they'll sign off on it. Even if it's only a simple piece of paper that's a copy of the plot plan for the site. But you can take the physical dimensions of your trailer, draw it on there, how it's gonna sit, meet requirements, denote where the propane tanks will be located, and you can get sign-offs on all these.
And you
little-
want approval from the fire department before I get the zoning approval?
That's not us. We don't, the fire department works through the building department, if I'm not mistaken, and these are life safety code. This is a memo that was given to us to give to you so that you know where the fire department stands on it. We don't vote and decide on the fire department's status.
I'm a little
They have fire code
confused.
requirements, and if you meet the fire code requirements, you'll get an operational. But if you don't, you will not get an operational.
Right, I'm a little confused because I thought that would be the next step. Like, I understand you were saying it has to do with a space issue and that's why it's coming up in zoning, but do I or do I not need to go to the fire department and get approval and bring it to you before you're ready to vote on this?
No.
I don't believe so.
No.
It would be a condition that you would have to meet in order to open the business if it's approved.
Of course, but that's the next step,
Wait a minute,
fire,
no, wait.
right?
Let's stop right now. Mark wanted to speak first. Mark.
I was just saying, if we can give the applicant some direction on specifically what this board is asking for, I think that would be helpful to her. She doesn't have high-paid attorneys and,
I'm
engineers
happy
doing this
she's here
for her,
doing
so-
this on her
No,
own.
why not? We're your high-paid attorneys.
We're joking, don't, she's,
So
this
if-
is horrible.
Okay.
If all we want is a simple plot plan showing where the truck would sit and parking space in existing buildings with, to scale, then let's tell her that's what it is. And then our future approval will be subject to the fire approval, but
Yeah.
that's a separate deal. Let's give her exactly what we want from this board, and I think that's fair.
Mark, if, on a project like this, we would give an approval to do it or not to do it. If the approval was to do it, the conditions set forth in the fire department are a condition of the approval. The applicant needs to meet these conditions before they can begin their work. We don't add or subtract to them, we just
Okay.
add that as a part of our conditional approval.
Right.
Phil was next, Brian.
Just a suggestion. The things that are on that list, okay? You can go and meet with Lieutenant Connor. Explain to him what you're doing. And on the plot plan that was talked about, position your vehicle where the tanks are that can meet these types of requirements and what they're gonna require for you to do that. And then show those on there as a preliminary drawing. Then we have an idea of how that trailer is going to set on the lot, the dimensions from the building, from wherever, that we have, where those tanks are, where those barriers, what type, and we have an understanding of what the intent is and what is going to be able to be approved. With the final approval, you will still be subject to, but at least that way you'll know what you need to do in order to meet that requirement. And
Their requirements.
their requirements, and there, when we're looking at it, and you come back and you say, I've met with Lieutenant Connor, this is where the building is, this is how my vehicle can sit, this is where the propane tanks are, this is where these barriers are, this meets this 6 foot from here, this meets it here where the customers are, and all of this, then we can look at that and say, oh, okay, fine, it fits there, and we all are on the same page of where we expect when you finally open, that we drive by and what we're gonna see, not that all of a sudden we find that you're on a different part of the lot because you couldn't put it there.
So what you need is a more detailed drawing with my propane tanks and my barriers. Is that right?
Yes, and the physical location of the trailer. Where's-
After meeting with Lieutenant Connor so that these 1, 2, 3, 4 bullets are met.
I'll make a suggestion that maybe you bring your trailer to the site when you meet with Lieutenant Connor. You physically, have it there so that you can kind of get a feeling for, and I would be willing to meet you out there as well. And we can go over, what all the setback rules are, the 6 feet from the building or whatever. And that
You
way
can
we
also do that with a spray can on the pavement. You don't have to drag the trailer all the way out there to do that.
Right.
I mean, it might be good just to.
By the time you move
see
it
it
around
there.
with the spray paint, though, it might be hard.
All right, we're gonna move forward
Yeah, I
now.
mean, could we just lay it out? Is that possible?
I'm not saying you have to do that, I'm just saying, that's a suggestion that you might consider to, meet out on site and go over all the issues that might come up, and he has an ability to look at the trailer and what it entails, besides whatever picture, he might have seen, he might have additional issues that he comes up with after seeing the trailer, I don't know.
All right, that's the end of that. Brian, do you have a clear list of what the applicant needs to do? So that you can give her the information after the meeting?
I think so, I mean,
So would the goal be to continue this item to the next meeting in the hopes that in the expectation that this can be done for our next meeting, so this applicant can be on her way for this?
I would like to see that happen.
I think that's excellent advice.
So somebody make a motion.
Motion to continue this to our next meeting, which is, what date, Brian?
June
14th.
Second.
Motion by Barbara, seconded by, who? Phil? Phil. My question to the applicant is, do you think you can meet this time frame and be here by June 14th and have the stuff ready that you're being requested to provide?
Yes.
Okay, good.
And I would state that if for some reason it can't come forward, that she would not need to come back and that Brian would be able to reschedule anything that might be necessary, if at all.
It's not a scheduled public hearing or anything like that, so we can,
That's the other thing.
we
Are
can
we,
move the
Yeah,
date
we
around.
need to make that clear, that we're either requiring that or not.
are we,
because
I think the board needs to vote on whether we're going to require a public hearing or not.
we do.
So prior to, well, you've already got a motion on. To continue it, is that what the motion was to be?
Seconded.
All right, seconded. So let's, can we do, conditions after we can make a motion to continue, or do we need to?
Motion to, Phil.
Well,
was
there's
to
already a
con-
motion
I'll
on the
withdraw
floor.
my second.
All right,
You're withdrawing your motion?
I'll make a motion to continue this application for a waiver of site plan for consideration by the board without public hearing.
Second that.
And that was seconded by John Heichel. Okay, any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor of Barbara's motion to continue and not require a public hearing? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Nay. And abstentions? All right, so what was the vote? 4, 5 to 2?
5 to 2.
5 to 2. Motion passes. 5-2-0. All right, well, Brian will give you the information that you need to prepare.
Against as well?
Sorry? I voted against it. I
Okay,
thought we
so
should have a
it's- got
public
it,
hearing.
It's 4-3.
Was 4-3?
Phil, Brian, you.
Oh, you voted against it.
No, ma'am.
5-2-0.
That's 5-2.
It was Phil and Tim.
I'm sorry.
5-2-0. Motion passes. So Brian, will you relay the information to the applicant that needs to be, and that way she can come back prepared for the next meeting, and we can hopefully vote on this issue.
Okay.
Thank you
Thanks
for
for
coming.
your help.
Barbara, do you want your 8:30 break?
No.
Is it in the rules of procedure?
We don't need if anybody needs to take an 8:30 break, they can get up
On
and take it.
Tim's rules.
No, we don't play that game. Okay, we have other business at this, no, it's a public hearing on the energy chapter. Amendment to the master plan is next, under new business. Are you gonna wanna use the screen, Brian?
Yes.
Whatever you want, I'll move over next to Brian.
Oh,
There's no other applicants.
No other applicants tonight. Jillian? Jillian, yes. She'll identify herself. All right, well, would you please identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm Jillian Harris from Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
Excuse me, Jillian, before you begin. There is a letter from Lou D'Alessandro that should be read into the record, Brian, or just be part of the record.
That is,
Isn't that related to this?
that is related to this.
All right, well, then I'll
If
make
you'd
it
like-
public here that there's a letter from Lou D'Alessandro congratulating the planning board for moving forward in this direction.
Hmm?
He-
Wait a minute, that's
Did
not how I
I
read it.
read it, Ryan?
He's encouraging the planning board to
Let's see.
support the energy
That's what I thought.
chapter. Yeah,
I just said for moving in the direction of the energy plan,
you said congratulating them for,
for moving in the direction,
Okay.
for considering it, and, for read it then,
That's
Mike.
not how, no, I don't think we need to read it. That's not how I read it. He's expressing his support for the energy plan.
right.
Moving in
I'm
the direction.
disappointed to hear that the effort may not be fully supported.
Considering it and approving it are part of what he wants us to do.
Sounds like he's not pleased with us.
Ryan, can you kill the lights in the front half of the building somehow?
So I'm,
Yours, Jillian.
thank you. I'm here to discuss the energy chapter for the Goffstown Master Plan, as we've been working on it for the past 6 months together. And I know the board knows how we got here and what's in the chapter, but for the benefit of the public, I'll just give a brief overview of some of the important parts of the chapter and the process that we took to get here. So I will just start with the process. Sorry, let me just organize myself here. So I came to the board in October 2011 to offer technical assistance through the Energy Technical Assistance and Planning Program that's coming from the state. Oh, thanks. And the board agreed to move forward with a memorandum of understanding to develop the energy chapter. And since then, we've had 3 public workshops to discuss the development of the chapter and what should go into it. And I'll start off with a few points that are in the chapter. Starting with RSAs. RSA 672 talks about proper regulations and that they should enhance public health, safety, and general welfare and encourage the appropriate and wise use of land. It also says that proper regulations encourage energy-efficient patterns of development, the use of solar energy, including adequate access to direct sunlight for solar energy uses, and the use of other renewable forms of energy and energy conservation. Then it goes on to say that there shouldn't be unreasonably limiting the installation of solar, wind, or other renewable energy systems, and then the protection of public health, safety, and welfare. RSA 674 discusses the purpose of a master plan and that it should enhance the unique quality of life and culture of New Hampshire and to guide the board in the performance of its other duties in a manner that achieves the principles of smart growth, sound planning, and wise resource protection. And it says that one of the sections that may be included is an energy section, which includes an analysis of energy and fuel resources, needs, scarcities, costs, and problems affecting the municipality, and a statement of policy on the conservation of energy. And I think one of the most important parts of energy planning for municipalities today is the economic benefits and opportunities that can be provided through energy efficiency. Energy efficiency measures directly reduce the amount of money that a local government must spend on energy, and when local governments reduce energy costs, then that money can be returned to the taxpayers or spent on other programs and services, where those taxpayer dollars are recirculated in the local economy instead of sent out of the state, as is the case with purchasing imported fossil fuels. The ETAP building assessments found some simple measures that could be implemented that would result in a 16% reduction of your municipal energy budget. And these assessments were sort of an on-the-surface look at possible opportunities in 3 of Goffstown's municipal buildings. So with a more in-depth audit, you could find even more opportunities for savings, and especially I think you could find more with a vehicle fleet audit, since Goffstown spends 65% of its energy costs on vehicles. So there are a number of possible funding sources and grants that the town could look into to finance these energy efficiency projects, and that would help to result in no upfront cost coming from the town. And it would just be a matter of finding what those options are and pulling it together. At the December 8th, 2011 Planning Board workshop on the energy chapter, we developed the following goals for the chapter. Those are to explore the formation of an energy commission, increase community awareness, advise and educate residents on reducing energy costs and consumption, explore alternative forms of energy in order to reduce fossil fuel dependence and to increase energy conservation and savings, work towards reducing energy consumption in municipal buildings, and encourage energy conservation townwide. As for the outline and the contents of the chapter, it has an introduction with a purpose, a section on energy conservation related to sustainability, Goffstown's energy goals, Goffstown's energy conservation policy resources, and current Goffstown initiatives. It has a section on state statutes and plans that are related to energy, a section on existing conditions in New Hampshire and in Goffstown, a section on issues and concerns, a section on new opportunities for energy efficiency, and then the recommendations and action plan for the chapter. And I'll just go through those recommendations because I think they're the most important part of the chapter. For the goal of exploring the formation of a formal energy commission, the actions would be to discuss the role of an energy committee in Goffstown with the Board of Selectmen, appoint a Board of Selectmen representative to the committee to work with them and coordinate on energy efficiency projects in Goffstown. For the goal of increasing community awareness, advise and educate residents on reducing energy costs and consumption, we have publicized energy savings measures the town is taking for municipal buildings in progress on reducing municipal energy costs. Create a page for the Energy Committee on the town website, page where they could publish energy efficiency tips and publish those in the local newspaper through the committee. Hold free events with an energy conservation focus and incorporate energy conservation measures into existing community events. For the goal to explore alternative forms of energy in order to reduce fossil fuel dependence and to increase energy conservation and savings, the actions are investigate alternative energy sources for municipal buildings, consider ways to encourage alternative transportation methods, encourage department heads to consider energy efficiency projects within and in coordination with other departments, consider making solar and wind renewable energy installations exempt from property taxation per RSA 72, 61 through 72. For the goal to work towards reducing energy consumption in municipal buildings, we have prioritize energy efficiency recommendations, and those would be the ones that came out of the ETAP building assessments and also the municipal energy assistance program that was done through Clean Air, Cool Planet for the town. The next one is to track energy use in municipal buildings and require quarterly reporting, and to appoint a responsible party for energy management in the town facilities. Recommend energy policies for municipal buildings, and consider innovative financing techniques for energy efficiency projects in municipal buildings. And for encouraging energy conservation townwide, we have consider innovative land use planning techniques for energy efficient development, review the existing master plan, zoning ordinances, and other town policies to promote and incorporate energy efficient development, and encourage recycling and composting in municipal buildings and townwide. So those are the recommendations in the action plan, and you've all had a chance to review the chapter. So at this time, I can take comments and questions.
Go ahead, Phil.
Where role does LNG play in this plan?
Who?
LNG, what role does it play in this plan?
I'm not sure what LNG.
Liquid natural gas?
Liquefied natural gas.
I mean, it's an energy source to consider, but it wasn't something that we focused on in the plan.
So there's no recommendation to take fleet vehicles and convert them over and use LNG?
There's not a specific recommendation to do that, but I would recommend when you're prioritizing your recommendations that came out of the reports, that's something to look at through a fleet audit.
I was asking because I didn't saw any reference the only thing I saw was to reduce them. So I was just wondering what role and what level of priority LNG was. Because LNG is the up-and-coming thing.
If it's a priority for the town, then I would encourage you to look into it.
I don't know if you're aware, but New York City has a whole new line coming into it with Con Edison. There's a whole new supply line coming into the city of New York. And what the LNG is going to do is it's going to eliminate or reduce the amount of fuel oil that's used. But LNG is the up-and-coming.
Really?
Section,
Really?
In New York, I mean.
New York City is a whole new pipeline coming in. It's a whole new thing with Con
I'm not
Edison.
adversarial about it, I've never heard about it.
But that requires a big investment, because anybody that's on oil burners has to junk all their equipment and put in natural gas oil burners. They're all different, it's all brand new
But
stuff.
that's the point. That's the up-and-coming thing. The company that's putting in is investing a whole new line into it, and they're working with Con Edison, okay? And it's up-and-coming thing, and
should that be something that we maybe add to this section 5 on new opportunities for energy efficiency? And just put a little, I mean,
Well,
there's
I-
stuff in there about solar, wind, hydroelectric, LEDs, biomass.
I guess the concern that I have, okay, is that LNG is a bridge fuel. And what is coming up recently and what's coming up now is the reserves that we have in this country on LNG, natural gas, the amount of reserves that we have also. I don't know if anybody's aware, but Utah is going to outproduce Alaska as far as oil production. So the amount of reserves that we have that are listed are underestimated. LNG is the up-and-coming bridge between oil and whatever's going to replace it, but it won't be able to be replaced for at least 50 years.
So what do they have in Penarville? Is that Yankee Gas or Public Service? Is that liquefied natural gas?
Liquid natural gas is, it's liquid. You convert your vehicle. It costs about $1,000 for me to convert my Explorer. You add a different tank, or if you have a pickup truck, you add it right behind.
So we're talking about vehicles, or we're talking about buildings?
I don't understand that the plan is particularly talking about anything. The plan is talking about making a recommendation that if the committee or the Board of Selectmen or the applicable responsible party wants to look into it, they should look into it. That's what I understand, Joe. Is that correct?
That's what I would.
Was there a debate on which particular conversion should occur for any of this in the chapter? Because I didn't see anything.
There's also electric conversions that you can
Right.
do for certain
None of which
vehicles
was
as well, but,
specifically
I mean,
analyzed.
Right.
yeah.
Right.
Well, the point I was bringing up is I brought up to the Board of Selectmen, and I discussed this with the chief, because we used to have a police vehicle that ran on gas years ago. And the chief I've discussed with him several years ago about looking into that for the regionalization of that. LNG is the brand name for it, but my understanding is that also you have a lot of FedEx is going to be switching over on a lot of the fleets, because if you take your 18-wheelers, a lot of them are going to be converting over there. And the only concern I have is it's not even mentioned in the plan. That's why I was asking, where is it in the priority? That's all.
It isn't mentioned in the plan, but we
Well-
can obviously look into it if it's something.
You
that
did have something in the action plan, didn't you, that addressed, fleet to some degree?
It was very general. It said to prioritize your energy efficiency recommendations that came out of those reports. So one of the recommendations that came out of the Municipal Energy Assistance Program was to do a fleet audit, so it could be part of that.
Okay, anybody else have any other comments, questions? Don't hear anybody saying anything?
Well, mine was a little off track too, and I'm sorry, I guess I'm kind of grandstanding, but speaking of biomass in section 5 that you mentioned, running a methane line from what's under Surratt Field to, for instance, the school in Pinardville, and having a methane heater there, is basically free energy. They do it, for instance, on Staten Island on an old dump site, the methane that comes off of the trash that's buried underneath there. I mean, presently they have a system at Surratt Field that burns it off. And wouldn't it be good to turn that into fuel? But that's apropos of absolutely nothing, I acknowledge that.
Well, that's one of the
thinking
things that we
outside the
looked
box.
into when we did that.
Anybody else? You have more to tell us, Jillian, or are you going to go for questions? How do you want to proceed?
I guess I'm just here to take any comments or questions that the board or the public has, and I don't know if Brian or whoever needs to make a motion for adoption, but that's what.
Brian, can you turn that, are we all done with this?
Yeah, I can turn that off.
Thanks. Turn the light back on, John?
Yeah.
Yeah, this is listed as a public hearing, so we do want to hear from the
I was
public
gonna wait,
tonight.
I was gonna open a public hearing next if we're all done internally right now.
I think I'd just like to make a few comments.
Go ahead, Brian.
We have been working on this for several months, since just the end of last year, and I think over the past few months, we've gotten different ideas as to what should or shouldn't be in the plan, and I've seen different versions of an energy plan. I do feel that it's important to have an energy plan in our master plan. As to exactly how that is set up, that's for us to work out, and I appreciate all the input that the board has given us over the past several months. I also am looking forward to the future, and I know that eventually we will be looking at rewriting our master plan or updating it more comprehensively, and I think it's important to at least get something in place to work with, so that then when we go to do that comprehensive update or rewrite, that we can then take from what we currently have in place and improve upon it. We can use that additional time to improve on what we've currently got, and we got an ETAP grant from Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. It's not a lot of money that went into it, and Jillian, she's been great to work with for the amount of time and effort she's spent. Is probably more than what we've gotten for the costs of what the grant was for. But I just want to say that I do feel like we should support and approve this as part of our master plan. And if we look at it in the future and think, oh well, we need to cut some of these things out, or we need to change a few of these things and add some of these things, we've got an upcoming master plan update that I think we can focus on and take care of that. So I think it'd be good for us to get something in there as far as policy goes, so that we can move forward and try to implement some of those policies over the next few years. So with that, I'll turn it back to you. And
Anybody have any comments before we open the public hearing? Okay, well, we'll open the public hearing. Does anyone from the general public like to speak on this matter?
Thank you.
Woman right here in the front, please. And please identify yourself for the record. Have a seat and relax.
Relax. My name's Christina Martin. I'm here on behalf of the Goffstown Energy Committee. And behind me, there are some Goffstown resident supporters, as well as 2 future taxpayers, up way too late. I'm here basically to just express as a taxpayer that this isn't just about the environment or climate change or, you know, using renewables. This, for me, is about saving money. Every day I see waste, every day, for little silly things that we could all do that would make a difference, that wouldn't change our comfort levels at all. Like shutting off your laptop at the end of the night. That would be saving money. And in the energy plan, part of it is just creating policies that the Energy Committee would do to, you know, have things like that in place. So for me, it's saving money. I'm a taxpayer. I have very little, and I want to kind of grab any bit of that I can and put it back in my pocket. And on that note, I'll bring it over to Mary Downs, if that's okay. She's also a member of the Goffstown Energy Committee.
You can both stay there if you'd like. Pull up 2 chairs.
Thank you. My name is Mary Downs, and I live here in town. I've lived here for about 8 years, so I'm a taxpayer and a resident and a parent with kids home and up. But I also am the energy administrator, or the administrator for energy programs at the New Hampshire Office of Energy and Planning. So it was actually our office that provided the federal grant funds and flowed them down through to the regional planning commissions to help with the technical assistance. So more than 60 towns throughout the state received ETAP funds, the Energy Technical Assistance Program funds, and 15 communities have undertaken with those funds energy chapters for their master plans. That includes Candia, Chester, Hooksett, and New Boston. And New Boston has recently adopted their plan, or their chapter. So just to give you some context, there's $6 billion a year that the state spends on energy, and $4 billion of that leaves the state immediately. Okay, so from our perspective at the state, bringing more of those dollars in and keeping them in New Hampshire not only helps with the economy, but it has a multiplier effect of 2 to 3 times what we actually spend. So it's really important for us to be managing those costs at both the municipal level and the state level. And my office does a lot of that at the state level as well. We actually have legislation was passed that calls for a 25% reduction in fossil fuel use in our buildings by 2025. We're actually well on our way to that. And we also have adopted a high-performance building standard, which holds the state and publicly and state-funded buildings to a higher building code and a higher standard than the standard business as usual. So I also want to point out that one of the main recommendations in the master plan, the energy chapter, is around the Energy Committee. And some of the questions that have been raised are questions that we would be happy to take up on a regular basis and go do the research and the legwork and bring back either formally or informally. So, for example, the compressed natural gas, I happen to know, I work at the state, we also funded a refurbishment of the state's compressed natural gas station on Stickney Ave near the DOT tanks. And Nashua also has recently invested in a CNG station. Manchester's considering it. There's kind of an I-93 trail that's going up that, and there is a lot of interest among businesses. It actually works really well for trash trucks and big rigs to work on compressed natural gas. And the small individual vehicle one is still a little bit of a hard sell there, but it's definitely doable and manageable. And so absolutely, that is an up-and-coming thing. Natural gas is incredibly cheap. It's at least as safe as gasoline. So that is absolutely something that we could take and go research, and then in the next round of a energy plan revision, we could include that in there. Methane, again, we've just done a feasibility study at the state for the Franklin wastewater treatment plant to see about capturing so wastewater treatment has a lot of methane, capturing the methane from that and using it for heat and electricity on site and offsetting their costs, because they have to flare it, which is, methane's a lot worse than carbon for global warming. So there's lots of things that are going on. There's a lot of activity among municipalities statewide. There's an annual conference that some of you may be familiar with for local energy committees that is get more people coming every year. So 300 people came last year and learned about what other towns are doing. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of really smart thinking and smart implementation going on. So obviously I'm excited about this, and I think this is, Goffstown's to be commended for having sought out the funding and received it and spent no local taxpayer money on that, and got a good product that we can build upon. So I would urge you to adopt it.
And I just have, I'm more of the simple person. She's got all the detail and the data. But I wanted to just point out too is the plan, I see it as kind of a goal or a vision. And, you know, when you do something, if you have a goal in mind, you're more likely to attain it, right? So having this goal, I think just, even if we do nothing, having it there at least gives you something to attain at some point, and maybe you'll get there. I mean, when the governor instituted the first 10%, we were all like, you're crazy. You know, we don't have any money. We're all doing what we can already, and we beat it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, just setting a goal, and think about your house. I mean, like my lawn. I was looking at my lawn yesterday, and I'm like, oh my God, I don't even know how to finish this. But I've got a goal now, and I'm going to start slow, and I'll get there. So just having that goal, I think, will, you know, be a valuable tool for Goffstown. That's it.
Thank you both. Any questions? John?
What's the difference in BTU when it comes to gasoline versus liquid natural?
It's actually compressed. The liquid natural gas is used, but it's generally used for really big things because it takes a lot more energy to compress it down to the liquid form. So with vehicles that we would be using around here, you'd be talking compressed natural gas. It doesn't have as many BTUs per gallon as what we're used to as gasoline and diesel, but when they do the calculations, they do translate it so that it's gasoline equivalents. And I don't know what the cost is right now per gallon for natural gas, but I think it's about half per BTU of what the regular gasoline and diesel is. I mean, it goes up and down with the market depending on what's going on, and I know gasoline has come back down. How much is it? For CNG?
And you don't use more?
The gas.
For what we fill up at the pump, but for CNG.
For natural gas, because what's really fueling the market right now is the Marcellus shales.
Right, but I don't think CNG is running the same.
No, I'm saying what gas is, natural gas, like Chesapeake.
Okay.
Natural gas.
Right, but what you buy for your tank to heat your home is entirely different than
No, I
yeah,
understand,
okay.
I understand what he's talking about. I think what he was talking about as far as gasoline for a vehicle.
Right.
But the fuel, the cost to operate your vehicle to travel the same distance.
Right.
Is about 1/4 with the compressed natural gas.
Right.
Than it is with gasoline. And the point is that we have so much of it, and it's coming out of New York State. They're finding more and more and more of this. I wouldn't be surprised if it winds up that we have it right here in New Hampshire.
Yeah.
And we don't, follow up, sure thing. We don't, when the municipalities use this, they don't pay a tax on that, or is there a tax? And if there isn't, or if there is, how do we get it?
You mean a tax break or a tax like it's in flux because it's so relatively new that people are looking into this. DOT is getting worried that if everybody moves to electricity, to electric vehicles and CNG, then they're not going to have any money to repair the roads. So it's being discussed right now, and I don't know the very latest, but it's definitely something that DOT is aware of.
That's why they're looking at a mileage tax.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. Right, thanks.
Anyone else?
Great. Thank you.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
So Brian, procedurally,
There's more people to comment.
Oh, we've got more public comments? I apologize. Kim, please.
Hi, I'm Kimberly Peace. I'm citizen at large tonight. Citizen at tall, I guess. I just wanted to come and speak in support of the Energy Committee and the work that they've done. I read the plan, and it's great, and I think it's something that we are using as steps towards the future of our town, and I was surprised to hear that there was discussion about whether to not implement it as part of the master plan. It seems like it's a win-win for all of us. it seems like we've used a lot of technical abilities. We've gotten some grants. Brian spent time on it. Volunteers have spent time on this. And it looks like it's a great idea to move forward with. And I just wanted to say that, I mean, just tonight I learned, 65% of our town, what was that town? Is the vehicles, the energy costs are vehicles. So that's, I mean, just that awareness of how our town spends our money and how we look at these things. It's not just changing light bulbs and, big natural gas projects. It's some, small things and large things. And just, I think that this is a great part of our master plan. I think that if we don't choose to adopt it as part of the master plan, I think that you're saying something about the hard work that your staff and the grant people and the volunteers have done in this town. And I think that that's disappointing to see this work being presented to this board and not accepted. And as someone I work in the environmental field, and I'm aware that all of these things are constantly changing and we have to be up to date as a town, and it's going to save us all money. And I'd like to see that you support it and adopt it as part of the master plan. So, thank you.
Okay. Ma'am?
Oh, me?
Someone else had their hand up in the back there earlier. No?
Alan did.
Alan did.
Oh, Alan had his hand up. I apologize. Alan?
Sorry, you're not used to recognizing me.
Oh, I know.
This side of the table, welcome back.
I'm on the wrong side of the bench here.
I know what you look like.
It's interesting that someone did pick up on LNG. There are now 6 stations in New Hampshire, of which I've done 3 of them. Nashua is one, and they're doing garbage trucks, all of them. State has got a project out for bid right now, state of New Hampshire. Energy chapter. I've edited it. I'm going to give it to Brian. I do not want to discuss it at all.
Thank you, Alan.
8 pages maximum. You got 31. Cut the
Are you
BS.
officially submitting that for consideration?
Yes.
Duly
Cut the
noted.
baloney.
I have just
There's a lot of extra things in there that are not necessary.
Mr. Yaton, I'm going to hold you off a second. One of the board members would like to comment.
I appreciate all the work that Mr. Eaton has done. I just have a concern that this is a public hearing, and if you just submit it to Brian, then how does that technically become part of the public hearing and the information? I just
Good
don't
point.
want to lose the opportunity of all the hard work that you've done not being able to be recognized by this board as input from the public hearing, that's all.
That's okay. I'll take it for what it's worth, but it's my comments. But I look at the master plan it's what this planning board wants to happen in this town. And how you're going to get there. That's all that should be in that chapter. I don't need to see how good Governor Lynch is in doing executive orders. It's not necessary, it's never been used before in any ordinance in this town. It needs to be organized as the same sequence as other sections of the master plan. Either we did it wrong the first time, or we're doing it wrong the second time. So I say it needs to be extensively rewritten and shortened to 8 pages. That's what I've done. This thing also tries to set up other compliance methodologies for achieving energy efficiency. Right now, there are 26 national and 7 state codes that govern energy conservation. We don't need another one. There's plenty out there. Now, I don't know if this board is aware that ASHRAE, which is a nomenclature for a national organization, just came out with a 2012 edition, which increases energy conservation by 10%. They have a draft for 2016 that increases it by 30%, and a net zero 2030 program, which means no impact by the year 2030. That's already in place. So when it comes to building codes, let your building official enforce the information he already has in hand. Don't create another level by saying you can take and add more stringent measures. You can by law, but I don't think you have to. A good example is, in this whole series here, there's not one discussion public schools are mentioned in the first paragraph, but never again in this master plan section. Who is the biggest energy user in this town?
I think it was the fire
It
station.
is not vehicles.
What she
It
said.
is the school department.
It was the fire station and the scale house, wasn't it?
That doesn't
No, those
even
are the
comes
two
close.
Those were the two with the worst rating.
It doesn't come close.
Okay.
So when you make the comparison, we need an energy committee in this community, that's for sure. We need a group of concerned citizens appointed or approved by the Board of Selectmen to work on something like that. But we first need to improve and hire an energy manager. That's in this ordinance 17 times.
Can I ask the applicant, the fellow speaker a question I believe Phil did? Would that be allowed? Why do you keep referring to this as an ordinance?
Excuse me.
You've done it multiple times.
Okay, fine.
Well, what is it, I mean, you understand that it's a master plan, which is an advisory document, right?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't have a problem with the fact that tax-free incentives for energy measures. But I think we need to reduce the scope of this document. I think we need to eradicate old and questionable federal regulations as ERA, RGGI, that are always in the New England Carbon Challenge. If this document's going to quote a web page, you should be able to find it on the internet. You might want to check, because I couldn't find one of them that I could read what it was about. If you want to consider energy conservation, think about street lighting, for instance. How many lights in Goffstown?
A lot.
A lot. Think about this, if you took the 400 watts that are in each one of them, that's 1,200 kilowatts a year. Think about that one. LED would be 120.
I know the state has undertaken a program through DOT to evaluate all their street lighting, and they are in the process of deciding what's in the interest of safety
Correct.
can be kept on or turned off.
Our traffic lights are LED.
Think about energy, another energy conservation. There are 6 exit signs in this building. They have 50 watts of power in them. If you change them to LED, you'll save $400 a year on the electric bill in this building alone.
We're on a default budget.
Whatever. So there's a lot of opportunities, and that's why I think this board needs to encourage the Energy Committee, make it more powerful, and I think they should give them more leeway into coming up with programs that benefit this community. I don't think we need additional codes. If you allow your building officials and your planning people to do the work that they are charged to do, you can solve most of those problems. Another interesting comment when it comes to energy, when you think about our master plan and our growth, we have about 7,000 homes here in Goffstown. Master plan predicts that we're going to add 4,000 more by 2030. Where does the problem lie in energy conservation in homes? Not with new, with old.
Air infiltration.
So the Energy Committee should stress on maybe doing something community-wide with programs that show people how they can do the things that they can do to save money and energy in their own homes. And one of them is infiltration, is the biggest one. I'm not here to try to put down the efforts that have gone into this program. I just think that it should be less, I think it's too wordy. I think it has to be more demonstrative, and I think it has to show the best thing was the short presentation at the first. It was, these are the rules that let us do it. This is the chart with the programs in it that we should be doing. That's your energy plan. It goes in the master plan. All the rest of it is eyewash. not needed. In terms of reusable energies, Manchester had a methane gas generator out there on Dunbarton Road. I don't know if anybody remembers. Now, when it burned up, they didn't replace it, so it couldn't have been too cost-effective at the time. So we might want to think about that one. It might be useful, I don't know. But they've never replaced that facility after it burned down. And I'll answer any questions anybody might have on me. I spent a lot of time looking at this, and I just think it's 8 pages would do the trick.
Thank you, Alan. Anybody have any questions or comments for Alan?
Thank you.
I have a comment, Mr. Eaton. I know you don't know who I am, but I know who you are,
I
Mr.
do.
Eaton. And I know your service to this town over the last 26 some odd years has been considerable. And I want you to know that I appreciate that. I know you've been on this board for a long time and you've helped out a lot. I think that's really great. I appreciate the ideas that you came up with there, and that's really great. I wonder if you would be interested in helping out the Energy Committee in town here as perhaps a mentor or a consultant to come up with ideas, because what we're here for tonight, sir, is to talk about adopting this energy plan. And the excellent ideas that you have among those 8 pages aren't really what we're here to sort of amend or change. However, we are going to amend our master plan sometime soon, and that would be really great to integrate into that. And what if you got involved and helped out with those, the efforts that that small committee is going to have to implement some of these ideas and to help us all save a little bit of money?
Well, it's a good suggestion. It's one of these topics I didn't cover. There are 8 architects in town, 14 engineers that are in the business.
Okay.
I talked to 2 of them today about volunteering to be on the committee, and I think I can convince 2 of them, longtime architects, that would be willing to serve on the Energy Committee.
Would you be willing to talk to them about that and maybe
I
come back and
sure-
report next time we have a meeting?
I
And
surely
we can
will.
possibly take it to the next step?
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Eaton.
I would commit myself, but right now I'm committed to building a homeless veterans shelter in Manchester, and that's taking most of my time, along with CIP and other things.
We've been to one meeting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Yates. Thank you. Ivan Beliveau. Name for the record, sir.
Ivan Beliveau, and I have my Goffstown Citizens cap on tonight.
Good.
I want to thank you for the opportunity, and before I start, I live on East Dunbarton Road, up the street from Mount Manchester, and that does create a tremendous amount of gas there. That compressor is up and running, and it's been there for at least the last 5 or 10 years since they capped the landfill there, so it's up and going. I don't know when it burned, but it's up and running now. I don't know what they do with the methane gas that's generated. And the comments I wanted to make is I think it's terrific that there be energy conservation and reducing a smaller footprint, keeping life simple. And I've been dedicated to that for decades. I've been running multiple wood stoves in my business and my house. I've been doing that over 40 years. I think it's really important to do that kind of stuff. I have a complete project to take my entire property off the grid. I bought my first box of LED lighting. I have my several solar panels up. My whole goal is to be completely energy self-sufficient and off the grid, and that's project's been going for decades. So I think that is tremendous. I intend to do it. I know there's answers all over the place. Europe uses tremendous turbo diesels. They get tremendous high mileage on their monster vehicles. They're getting 40, 50, 60 miles to gallon. I don't understand why this government restricts them from coming into this country. Ford is hugely successful in South America with multi-fuel vehicles. Multi-fuel vehicles have been around for 40, 50 years. And you can take a Ford in South America and drive up to any station and put 100% alcohol, corn oil, diesel, avgas, gasoline, any mixture automatically, independently. The vehicles are all rigged and digitized to do that. Why those are restricted in this country and why ethanol is restricted in this country by a government is a paradox.
The military's been using multi-fuels for how many decades?
More than I've been alive.
More than you have been alive. So the answers are all over the place, and I'm a little confused, because a lot of the barriers are in place to this, put in place by our government, which confuses me. And now I sense that our government has billions of dollars to spend on this project, and I think it's a wonderful project. It's how to implement it and who should implement it that is my concern. Because I think the private sector has tremendous information. It's there, it's on the internet. Anyone researches this can do this automatically. Costs are tumbling down. It's a no-brainer. But what does concern me, when I hear that the government has billions of dollars and to give towards this, and you can write all these grants, you got to rush out and get all these grants to do this, all of a sudden I have a concern. Because I think you have to be living under a rock not to recognize that our government right now may be struggling financially. I mean, fighting this, fighting that, all of a sudden my question is, where is this government money coming from? And I have a concern about that, so I would urge this planning board to proceed very carefully with this. I think it's a great idea. I think it's wonderful that the schools, the towns, our vehicles, the answers are truly all over the place. My only concern is, how do we do it and how do we fund it? And I tell you with great confidence, at least based on my experience, when somebody says this money doesn't cost us anything, it's free, the grant money, it's great, if you don't get it, somebody else is going to. Red lights, warning bells go on, off, all over the place. So I would just request that you think twice about this.
Any questions? Thank you, Ivan. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in the public hearing? Well, I guess we'll close the public hearing then. All right, now I'll go back to the question I started to ask. How are we going to proceed on this? Are we going to proceed with it as is, or do we want to have an amended version of what we have? So the board would like, I'd like the board members to speak to that.
Mr. Chairman?
Please, Richard.
To specifically answer the question you just posed is, I would go with an amended chapter if we go with it, if we go with an energy chapter. And from listening to the public hearing and some of the comments here, I can vote yes for an energy chapter to our master plan. However, as it's written, I can't vote yes to the energy chapter that's in front of us. Some of the things that Alan told us agree with some of the things that I have done to my versions, because we've gotten versions in the past. This energy chapter can be useful, but it can be much shorter. There are various components of this energy chapter that I like. One of the things that I do like, I was looking at the reference we were given to the RSA 38. Right now, my understanding, and someone will correct me if I'm wrong, is that our Energy Commission is a volunteer, non-appointed, but perhaps providing our Energy Commission with the kind of appointments that the Conservation Commission in town is given with, and the Conservation Commission generally reports to the Board of Selectmen or to the Planning Board and has some formal ways to get their message across. I like that idea for our Energy Commission, with an appointed and voted chairman, members that rotate in and out based upon the appointment by the selectmen. I like that idea, because when it's coming from, and then they would be town officials coming from a town official, the education efforts, I think, would be more meaningful.
Thank you. Anyone else? Mark?
Yeah, I'd like to compliment the group that put this chapter together. I think it's there's a lot of good information, some good suggestions in here, but in my opinion, it goes a little too far. I think it's too long. And I think by the time it gets published, a lot of it, or some of it will be out of date with the way innovation changes, types of energy that are available, the technology of energy consuming devices. I hate to see us locked into some sort of central planning, top-down chapter like this. I'm all for requiring the town facilities to be more energy efficient, but I'm afraid that this document eventually will lead to putting new restrictions on private development, private property, eroding some property rights. And I think there's a real danger of that, and I think we need to be very cautious in adopting something like this. It does talk about, for example, incorporating energy efficient development and certain tax breaks for preferred energy efficient projects. I think that would affect other property taxpayers around town. So I can't support this in its current iteration. If we want to weed it way down, we might consider that. I had sent some suggestions to Brian earlier. Maybe I should send them around to the rest of you if you'd like to see them, but I don't think it's quite ready for prime time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. Anyone else like to comment on the master plan amendment possible? Barbara?
I think there needs to be a decision made. And I don't know how, as chair, you want to do it. But this needs, how this process is going to go, either as to conclusion tonight or conclusion in the future, needs to be decided by this board now. We have essentially had 3, if not 4, presentations of the same thing. I'm hearing tonight of more comments from members in regards to the plan in front of us, that it's my understanding we previously were working with the people who worked on this document, who asked for comments. I know, Mark, you got some stuff in. I had a couple of comments. You know, every time I look at a document, even if I've written it, I find something that I can change. So if we want to keep looking at this energy chapter, that's fine, but I can guarantee you, I would expect that every meeting somebody would have something to change, even if they missed it the previous week. I think that people have worked on it, and a course needs to be set, whether we direct people on this board to now take it over and to work on their comments and bring it back. I think that might be one option. I think to ask Southern New Hampshire Planning to continue to work on it after they have asked us 2 times to submit comments and incorporate it is no longer reasonable to them. I am on the board. I am not employed by Southern New Hampshire, but I'm looking at them as people who we contracted with essentially to do this work some time ago, and we are way beyond the time period that we discussed initially when this was done. I would also point out to the board that I have heard, based upon our own discussion or public comment, a discussion on appropriate energy uses and types of energy. I didn't hear that at all in the recommendation chart. It was committees to look into, suggest, reduce. On the one hand, I heard a public suggestion that the biggest consumption of use that we should be looking at is private, as in older homes. And on the other hand, I hear members speak about their concern that this is going to cause private homeowners to do anything. I've heard that this is something supposed to be done by a committee as a recommendation, and then I've heard other members talk about this is formal recommendations. We heard people refer to it as ordinances and code. You know, the planning, the master plan is a planning document. I don't know if all of the members have had an opportunity to look at it or know the history of it, but it's a document that has been at times done by consultants as to the whole plan, or at one point it was actually done with committees for each chapter of citizens did it, and the chapters were then incorporated into a final plan. One of the reasons the chapters all look the same is because the last time it was done, it was hired out to a consultant who did all the chapters. They haven't always looked the same. And I think Brian referenced the fact that at some point in the future, because there is a state requirement to update it, we will be asked to look at as a board the process for updating it. So I'm just someone who thinks that the process probably needed to be outlined and defined a little better before we began. Because we're sitting here now, again, not in a very different space
Right.
than we were a couple of meetings ago on this. And so I would just encourage board members to come up with some sort of a consensus as to how to proceed, whether it's to vote on it tonight, or whether to vote to handle it some other way. But I think at this point, this board needs to take responsibility for it, and proceed based on the public comment and what we've received from Southern New Hampshire Planning working on it. And that is where I sort of stand on it. I think this needs to be dealt with one way or another with a path.
So it sounds like voting on the issue tonight would be a positive move for the town, and we can always amend it at any time in the future. Bill?
My recollection, we had a discussion on this. I think before the second presentation that we've had on this, about whether this should be part of the master plan or whether this should be a separate energy plan. I thought we had, as a board, that we had that discussion, and I thought the direction that we were going at that time was that it was going to be a separate energy plan.
I don't remember that.
I remember having the discussion.
A reference document?
Like other planning documents that we have that aren't part of the plan, such as a solid waste plan, different types of plans that are not necessarily part of the master plan. But I remember having that, and I believe if the minutes of research that we had that discussion, and we were leaning in a separate document.
I don't recall that, so.
I can relate to what Phil says, because I use the term, and I haven't been at all of the energy plan discussions, having only been here since, I think, April, is that when we started? But when this was last presented, when I was present, at the time, given what I saw, I thought it was not appropriate as part of our master plan, and instead, if we were going to adopt it, we could adopt it as a reference document. And that might be along the lines of
I
what we were
remember that
talking
I
about.
remember that discussion.
Yes. But, you know, I'm willing to vote yes for an energy chapter to our master plan, but I'm not inclined to vote yes to this chapter as it sits in front of me.
Okay.
And I think, as Barbara was saying, you know, which way do we go? I'd be willing to work with whomever, maybe the volunteers who have spent so much time in Goffstown on energy issues, getting a master plan pared down to something that I'd be willing to work for.
Mr. Chairman, is it possible to accept it as is and then amend it afterward?
Well, that was my suggestion. I want to know what the process is for amendments. Can anybody enlighten me on amending? Is it one other public hearing every time you want to do an amendment?
Yes, anytime you amend the master plan, if it gets adopted as part of the master plan, anytime you amend the master plan, you have to publish notice in the newspaper for a public hearing, and, you know,
When is our next?
recommended policies are to, you know, hold additional public meetings to try to, you know, gather input from the public when you're working on stuff that deals with the master plan. In this instance, you know, we had input from the Energy Committee, which is essentially, you know, the input from the public that, you know, we were trying to obtain, so.
Mhm.
We didn't necessarily hold like focus groups and surveys and all that kind of other stuff
Mhm.
that we would normally do in a master plan update process. But, you know, the requirement is just a public hearing notification, and that's it.
Brian, when is our next scheduled review of the master plan as it stands right now?
Well, I've suggested to the town administrator, and I've put it in as a CIP request, that we begin next year. So.
So if we were to adopt it at a meeting now or 2 weeks from now, we would have a period to make amendments to it and then change it a year from now or whenever we do that.
Right, I'm anticipating that it could be a possibly 2+ year process to get through, you know, a comprehensive rewrite of our
That's
master
usually
plan.
a couple years.
It takes a while to get through that process and, you know, involve the community and take in all the input and the comments and everything from every person in the community and try to incorporate that into the document. And so I'm anticipating it could take 2 to 3 years to finish it. My goal is to have it done by 2016, which would be 10 years from when we did our last update. And essentially, if we started next year, 2013, that gives us 3 years to do it. So,
Mark?
Is a motion in order at this point?
We could have a motion, but I don't know if we're done with our discussion at this time.
Can I just make maybe a suggestion that maybe one way to proceed here in light of the fact that public hearings require notices, which is a cost and that
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Sure.
And I'm not hearing opposition to an energy chapter. I'm hearing some continued issues with the content. Would one concept be to sort of take ownership of this chapter now as a planning board and perhaps to consider a motion to accept the energy chapter from as presented by Southern New Hampshire Planning, to accept it for the planning board's consideration, and then to further perhaps continue consideration of this for maybe 2 meetings from now to allow people who have just made comments, I don't mean just made comments, have further comments, to then meet independently over the next time period to make such revisions as they might want, so that we could then have a date certain to bring it back with these final comments of the planning board members to consider, and essentially thank Southern New Hampshire Planning, because quite honestly, for, you know, Jillian to keep coming back when she hasn't even gotten all the comments that we're talking about here doesn't seem to make much sense. I'm just throwing that out as a suggestion. I don't know how it works.
Brian, did you want to comment?
Yeah, I think it occurs to me that voting on it tonight makes a lot of sense, based on what you folks have said. There's sort of a due diligence process when you do something like this. I'm going to, you know, from a layman's perspective. And I think the due diligence has been the public hearings that we've had so far. Taxpayers have said they're due. A lot of people have, you know, read through this document, and I think there's some point where the culmination of all that sort of discussion has to result in action. And I think that we should move on adopting this tonight.
Thank you, Brian. Richard?
I like what Barbara said, saying, yes, thank you. We, as a planning board, accept this as a product of the, and tell me if, I'm basically trying to say back to you what I heard. We accept this from the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission. Thank you. We're gonna take this, work locally, and bring back to the planning board 2 meetings from now, 1 month from now, the edited product for a final vote?
I threw that out only because I see a board struggling with the process here and not making a lot of headway after a few meetings. I mean, I am willing to vote on it tonight. I hear that people, you know, I know that there's future plans for amendment. There's a lot of benefits, I think, to voting on it and adopting it tonight. I have some concerns that as this goes on, it gets diluted. I think that it's been properly recognized that there has been a process that's followed. It contains recommendations. It's not an ordinance. It's not a code. It's a planning tool that is part of a bigger planning tool that's constantly being looked at and will be under revision in a couple of years. But yes, I think that's another option, because I want us to come out of this meeting tonight with a resolution on either having dealt with it as it is, or a decision on how we are going to deal with it as a board, because I think the issues at this point are, we've had public comment, and our comments that have been submitted have either been considered or not, and we need to make a decision on the actual words.
A quick comment too, I promise it'll just take a second. And if other members of this board have better ideas down the road, I'm all ears for amendments, you know, and if they're public hearings, I'll be there 100%. You know, I'll give fair ears to any better ideas you have. I think it's gonna trickle down and benefit us all. However, it occurs to me that action tonight really doesn't have much of a downside.
All right, if anybody else?
Just
Bill?
one question, so the discussion that the planning board had in the past about just adopting this as a separate plan outside of the master plan is not something that we're gonna consider?
We can consider that too.
You can consider anything you want, but we
Whatever
need to
you want.
decide what we're gonna consider so we can move forward.
Well, I guess I'm confused on what I'm hearing, because when I brought this up before, it sounded as though nobody remembered that's been on the board prior to the new board that we had that discussion.
Well, at this time, Phil, it's a request to make it part of our master plan. So if you wanna do something
I-
different, you need to
I
make that
understand
public.
that, that was the request when it first came, and we had a full discussion on that, and my understanding was that we were inclined to accept it as a separate plan. And we had discussion, and the reasons were brought up by the board why not to include it in the master.
Well, if we had a vote, and the vote was in the majority to do that, then that's what we're doing. But if there was no vote, a discussion is only exchange of ideas, it's not binding.
I understand what you're saying, but I thought that that was the consensus of where the board was going.
Consensus is derived by vote,
But
in
there was
my
no-
opinion.
But there was no vote.
There was no vote.
Okay.
There was no vote.
Okay.
So there was no consensus then.
I'm just trying to be clear.
Idea, and you could work toward something we could all vote for yes, later.
We're already getting towards the time that
Well-
I'm gonna stop remembering things soon anyway.
And we still have more items on the agenda, we have people still waiting in the audience, so let's,
Make a motion.
Mark wants to make a motion, please.
Having failed to reach consensus on the content wording of this, I move that the planning board not adopt an energy chapter this time, and wait until next year when we look at the overall master plan and reconsider at that time, and publicly thank the committee for its efforts.
So your motion is to not accept it and wait 1 year?
Right.
Second.
Seconded by Richard? Seconded by Richard. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, now, you're gonna pay careful to the vote.
I want to discuss my second, although I want to give you opportunity first to discuss your motion.
Yeah, since we're gonna look at the overall master plan next year, I think we should look at this at that time. I don't think this has been fully vetted as much as we'd like, and this gives us additional time to look at it and incorporate it into the overall master plan at that point.
And the reason I seconded it is because I agree that this plan as written is not acceptable to be part of our master plan right now. And by waiting, we can wait the whole year, or we could do, as I mentioned earlier, have one or two or more of us work with the local energy commission to get this to something that would fit perfectly to our master plan. That's why I seconded the motion.
Okay, thank you for that. Any more discussion on the motion? Call a vote. All those in favor of Mark's motion to not accept it and wait 1 more year to reconsider, say aye.
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 So we have Mark, John, and Richard. So you have 3. All those opposed?
Aye.
I'm opposed also to waiting. Phil is also opposed to waiting, so the vote is 4-3. Motion is defeated.
3-4. Good.
3,
Oh,
4,
3.
ayes always go first.
Oh, okay, 3-4. I didn't learn that. Now I did. Okay, the motion is defeated. Anyone else have another motion?
I move that we accept the energy plan as part of our master plan for the town.
I'll second it.
Motion by Brian Hanson to accept the plan as is, and seconded by Barbara.
And I second it with the understanding that further work can and will be done on it and brought back to us, and it can always be done independent of the formal master plan process.
Absolutely.
Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, I'll call for a vote. Those in favor of Brian's motion to accept it as is, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. So we have, what, 3? Those opposed? 4. Defeated.
I'll make a motion that we accept the document as a separate reference document.
I'll second that motion.
Motion on the floor by Phil to accept the energy chapter as a separate document, seconded by Richard. Any discussion on the motion?
Yeah, what exactly, hey.
Please,
What
jump
what
right
ex-
in.
What exactly would that mean? What's the difference? What's at stake here?
Well, then what we should do, if we're going to adopt every plan that we have and incorporate it into the master plan, then we should take all the other plans that we have, that we operate under the community, and incorporate those into the master plan.
What is the impact, Phil, of making it a separate document versus an energy plan, a master plan document?
Yeah, like, what's the authority? What's the difference between the authority?
I know that master plan goals are considered in CIP and planning board discussions. I don't know if separate documents are considered as sources for planning board discussion.
I think they are. I know some of the transportation plans that have been done over the years have been incorporated into cost calculations for different things.
But I mean, I'm saying it's when you have CIP's authorization under the RSA is to consider master plan goals, and that's part of the authority of CIP. If this is gonna be a separate document, then I don't know they'll have the authority under town process to bear weight on decisions.
The reason I seconded Phil's motion, as I said before, I do not agree that this master plan as written, or this energy chapter as written should be part of our master plan. However, if accepted as a reference document by this planning board, it would give some credence to this planning board working with Energy Commission members to get this to the point where we can get a 7-0 vote to adopt it as part of our master plan. I see it as a necessary step before we can have this incorporated as part of our master plan. Because, you know, obviously right now, there are components of this that are divisive, at least to some members of our group. And I think with additional work, we can get this to where everybody here can vote yes for it.
Can I just ask, do you have other comments that haven't been brought up tonight, or are you kind of echoing people's comments that have already been stated, or?
The things that we heard tonight from some of the folks in the audience and some of the folks at this table. And, you know, everybody has probably 1 or 2 more of these at home with written comments on them. I know Mark does, and I know I do, and we've all stated them here tonight. But I think we can get to the point that we can have an energy chapter to our master plan, but not this big document that is, you know, already outdated.
Well, Phil, now, do you concur with Richard's statement that it could be moved to the master plan at a future date, or would you say that it should never be part of the master plan?
You never say never, you know that.
I'm asking you.
Anything could be, we can make anything part of the master plan that we want. I mean, some of the input that we heard tonight was that one document that was given to Brian for reference was 8 pages. Comment was made that it should be 8 pages, and what I'm hearing from some of the members here is the length of the document, and from what I'm gathering, or what my understanding is that some members are willing to look at this and look at what was presented to Brian, and perhaps at a future meeting, a 10-page chapter comes that's acceptable to the board. I don't know, I never say never.
Okay, in the interest of time, I think we should move forward with the vote on the motion. Phil's motion was to accept it as a separate document, and it was seconded by Richard Meany. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
I'm gonna vote in the affirmative.
Okay, so who said yes? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And those opposed? Two
So I'm
opposed.
happy to have this concluded.
So it was 4-2.
5 to 2.
5 to 2.
I'm glad you pushed us to conclude it.
I think it's cool that you guys want to improve it, okay? I think that's cool. Okay.
So we have officially accepted this master plan energy chapter as a separate document, so the word master plan would need to be struck from the cover page of this sometime before you officially distribute it.
I would like to thank Julian for coming to our meetings and the work she's done on it.
And everybody else.
So was the
Thank you.
public.
Thank you, Jillian.
You're welcome.
Officially noted. Okay, moving on to other business. We have a grant application for New Hampshire Community Planning Grant Program. Focus on zoning regulations in Pinardville. It's a 2-year grant, $50,000 available for each year of the award of the grant.
We're gonna turn the PowerPoint back on this.
I promise this will be brief.
Why do they get to leave and we have to stay? They get to leave and we get to stay? It's because we're getting paid the big bucks.
So close, like eating spaghetti with a spoon.
The purpose, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, board members. The purpose I'm here tonight is to talk on the New Hampshire Community Planning Grant. We've talked about this at staff. We've approached the Board of Selectmen, and we would like to submit an application to the New Hampshire Community Planning Grant Program for the specific purpose of studying and doing a master plan and proposing regulations in Pinardville. Now, the purpose of this grant is to promote smart growth and sustainable development through regulations, and it's really to promote local environmental sustainability, economic sustainability, and social sustainability. And what I'm here tonight is to look for your feedback and also the planning board's support in this application, because one of the major criteria is the support of the community. And the reason we want to look at Pinardville is all you need to do is look at the zoning ordinance. When the zoning was adopted in 1961, you had, which one is the pointer, Brian, the red one? Yeah. You had commercial, here's where King's Bowling Alley is, and it goes to Station 17, I believe. And then there was another pocket here. Fast forward to 1988, that commercial strip is still there with the industrial, which is now Surratt Field. Commercial was put in response to where Shaw's Supermarket is, as well as Goffstown Square, and then you have a few pockets. You've got right here the Pinardville Athletic Association and a few other pockets. And this whole time, there you've got residential development that's in between these commercial developments and directly behind these. Fast forward to today, you're looking at the same exact commercial zoning, same pockets. Now we have the RSBOD, which is a residential small businesses and office district that serves as a transition, but still you've got the pockets of residential zoning as well as residential use in between those commercial and directly adjacent to those. And why we think this needs to be done is we look to the master plan, the 1997 master plan, the corridor plan, and I learned tonight, I was incorrect, it was actually 2006 master plan. It talks about specific to Pinardville, it talks about the traffic levels, the curb cuts, the improving pedestrian pathways and access, and getting a consistent architectural style and signage, and it really, specifically the 97 master plan talked about getting committees together to study Pinardville and the village. And the village was studied, and we got the village commercial district, but there were no changes made in Pinardville. And then you've got the corridor plan as well as the most recent master plan that specifically call out Pinardville to treat it as a unique section of town and to really keep the quality of place. We would be submitting a 2-year grant that, starting this summer, would be to develop an RFP, identify a consultant, and because these grants, you must hire a consultant, a third party, which we think is a benefit because it would have somebody with an outside perspective to come in and guide the planning board and the town through this process in the fall and through the winter to come up with a Pinardville plan, which is specifically called for in one of the action goals of the current master plan. Come up with, use GIS to identify important sites and resources, and then in the summer of 2013 to start drafting those regulation changes, because that is really what these grants are looking for. We're not proposing any regulation changes. We're not even saying which way this would go. We're just saying we're looking for your support and your feedback so we could submit this application with your support so we could have somebody guide us through that process to see what the town wants to see happen in Pinardville.
I have a question for you, Derek.
Yeah.
When you say "we," who you refer to?
It would be zoning changes, development regulation changes.
No, who's "we"?
We would be staff, planning board, the public. You'd be almost doing a master planning process focusing on Pinardville with the outcome being regulation changes.
What would that be like? What do you mean?
You-
A big dialogue among townspeople?
Identify your speakers. Phil is next.
I'm sorry, excuse me, sir, thank you.
Derek,
Open forum.
we had some zoning issues that we had to deal with last election. And we had people, a lot of residents that were here in the planning board, spoke about working with residents to achieve some zoning changes in the area. This would be a vehicle to, I'm asking just, is your expectation that this would be a vehicle that we could work with residents along the corridor in that area to come up with some planning for the whole corridor?
Absolutely. You're talking, there was a petition warrant article to change some of the zoning, which is in the RSBOD district. This would be to look at the entire Mass Road corridor from the Manchester line to that 114, 114A intersection.
And as a follow-up, Mr. Chairman, so this, in effect, we would be completing the comments that we made to the public that we would be looking forward to working with them to effectuate what would be acceptable to everybody.
Absolutely.
Brian, please.
That, actually, what Phil just asked, it totally satisfied me.
Derek, I want to know, what's the net gain going to be? If you get your grant and you do your planning, what's the net gain for Pinardville?
We think that we could come up with some radical zoning. Our zoning there has always been reactionary. It has always been, okay, there's commercial development here, let's make it commercially zoned, or it's been on a lot-by-lot basis. This is get the community input to get the regulations for what the community wants to see there. Is that form-based zoning? Is that, some other type of zoning? It's to really, is it through just planning board regulations? What does the town want to see there and implement those changes? Rather than being reactionary or deal with it on a, okay, we want to change these few lots, just do it, just piecemeal. Let's study that entire length and see what the town wants to do there and what they envision the future to be there.
Thank you.
And one of the other issues is Pinardville has a lot of non-conforming lots. I mean, it's been, cut up into small, very small lots, and it's been like that for a long time. And the zoning has really never changed to a degree that allows those lots to be what they are, not be so non-conforming. We can make changes to allow for houses to not be, have a setback of 15 feet, when they only have maybe 80 or 90 or 100 feet of room to work with. I mean, that's just one tiny little example of a regulation that I know that is non-conforming all over the place in Pinardville. But coming up with these changes can hopefully allow some of those non-conforming lots to go away, and we can come up with zoning that really matches what already exists there. So.
Now, would changes in zones, if they were affected, would they change people's taxes? Are people gonna have to pay more tax if they live on a residential lot right now? And let's say we swipe that commercial line right down through that whole section, we turn that on commercial. Are they gonna be taxed more on their properties by this methodology?
I think it's not a fair question of Derek.
Well,
I think what happens is.
He's here representing the.
I understand, but you're asking an assessing question of them, and.
No, I'm asking a question, is it when you change someone's tax zone that they live in from residential to commercial, to the residential, do they change a different tax?
They'll be based on use.
It's on use.
So they do not have a negative tax effect?
If they turn their house into a commercial
then it changes.
enterprise based on them
I'm
now
just-
being zoned commercial, then they would be zoned.
I just
or
wanna be sure that a resident who
assessed.
lives on a residential lot right now, whose
Commercial
lot gets changed to
taxes.
commercial zone, doesn't get charged commercial tax.
No, because it's a resident, it's the use, it's a residential
Fine,
use.
that was my
But if he
question.
does something in there, the fact that he has commercial property now gives him opportunity,
That's correct.
okay? And if once he exercises any of those opportunities, he will affect his taxes.
Now, if we adopt a plan that changes residential lots into these commercial, say for instance, are we looking at the possibility of groups of 5 or 6 residences being all bought up and they wipe the whole bunch out, and now you're gonna put up a Lowe's or something down there? Is that-
If that's what the community desires and that's the regulation that comes out of it, that's definitely a possibility. But that's a possibility today, because most of the development that's done down there is through variance and waivers.
Okay.
You have a 50-foot setback from residential districts. That makes development and infill and redevelopment of lots down there very difficult. So even if you got a group of CVS, that was what, 4, 6 lots where Kings Lane is? And,
About 6.
and for them to try and get it in there and get it situated to meet all their setback, it was very difficult. Now, could they have done it through the waiver process and variance process? Potentially, but is that how Goffstown wants to see development happen down there, through waivers and variance? Or do you do a study, receive public input, come up with something on what you want to see in 30 years?
Yeah.
And that's why we want to really pursue this application.
Any other questions for Derek?
Can you just, so where's the money gonna go, this $50,000? Where do you see it going?
It has to go you have to hire a consultant. It cannot be done by in-house. Now, that consultant is either through a competitive bid process, or you can contract with your regional planning commission.
Which is the Southern New Hampshire Planning Commission.
You'll be involved in awarding the, or
How is that process gonna happen?
recommending it?
Yeah, I think that would happen at the staff level, but we also see the planning board being very involved in administering this grant to see.
Who ultimately makes the decision on who's selected? I think that's what he wants to know.
However, normally what you do is you develop a steering committee, and it would be made up of staff and volunteers from, I would hope, Economic Development Committee, people from the community to make those decisions and how you're gonna rank your RFP.
Who makes the final decision of who gets selected?
If it's by competitive bid process, it's a bid opening, and the selectmen must award the bid then, right?
Yeah, application.
This is what he's.
Okay, yeah, it would,
Okay, so-
normally those are awarded by the Board of Selectmen.
Okay.
it doesn't necessarily always have to be on the low bid, depending on how
Lowest qualified bid.
it doesn't always have to be that. If there's a request for qualifications and the qualifications aren't met by the submittal, then, you know, you go to the next application. So, and then if they present a fee that doesn't meet the amount of the grant or how much money the town has to spend on it, then you go to the next application.
So are we looking for a vote on this tonight, Brian?
Yes. Essentially just a vote of, you know, we support staff moving forward and the community moving forward with this. We have actually already presented this to the selectmen, and they have voted and want the town to go forward
And it
with
was
this.
unanimous vote.
It was unanimous.
All right, then at this time, I'm gonna ask the members of the committee to state their opinion as we go around the room. Now, I think we're done discussing this. We got map 35 Miller's Landing to talk about tonight, and we still have rules and procedures, and it's 5 after 10. We're not staying late, so let's get this over with. So, around the room, one person at a time. Phil, you're first.
I support it.
Richard?
I'm gonna have to abstain because I was gonna ask how much is this gonna cost the town?
We would be applying for a 2-year grant for $50,000, which would go towards the consultant. We have not gotten a budgetary figure of what a consultant would cost and how much additional funds. The majority would be staff time.
Page A5.
If it were limited to $50,000, we would be in for about 3,000 some odd dollars of actual cash.
Actual cash.
So it's not a huge amount, and we could pull that from anywhere. And then the rest of the match would be able to be met by in-kind, so staff time and volunteer time, and all of that can be counted as dollars toward the matching requirement. It is a 25% match requirement, but like I said, you know, only 25% of that 25% is actually needed for cash.
Does that
So,
answer your question, sir?
I would say no.
You say no. John?
Yes.
John supports it. I support it.
I support it.
Support.
No, I do not.
Okay, well, there's only 2 naysayers in the room, so you can,
I'll make a motion to support the application for the CPG program for a community-based study to lead to regulatory changes for Carnarvon.
Barbara's made a motion. Does anybody want to second it?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Phil. All those in favor of Barbara's motion, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
No.
No.
We have 2 noes.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you for waiting.
Thank you, Derek.
Thank you, Derek.
Next. I'm sorry? Okay, we're gonna take a short break here while our recording secretary uses the one ladies' room. We'll stay on TV in the meantime. We don't have to go anywhere. for elderly housing, if I'm not mistaken, way back when. They're having a discussion on vesting. Would you explain what vesting is gonna be about, Brian?
Well, I'm just trying to get the board's input on what I should do really with this project. There's been a few people asked to revive it. What's happened is they got a plan approved conditionally, they got the plan signed. They actually even went ahead and started doing a few things on the site towards construction, but they didn't really get very far with it on the construction side of it. And to me, then they let it sit for several years. And to me, when I look at it,
Has it ever been applied for an extension, time extension?
not on the permits or anything like that. I mean, that's what you need when you're, once you.
Was it recorded?
It's not, it's a site plan, so
Okay,
you don't record
right, okay,
site
sorry,
plans.
yeah, I know.
So,
Said site plan.
to me, I mean, it's past the 1-year deadline of when you're supposed to get going with your
Substantial.
plan and construction, substantial completion or anything else like that, I don't believe has been obtained. And so, really, I'm just wanting the board to confirm for me, if I tell these people, go back to site plan, go back through the site plan process, that you guys would agree that that's the correct process to do.
Well, for those of us who've been watching it, that whole project was nothing but a gravel pit for somebody, and they dug all the gravel out of it and hauled it all away, and now they're hauling it back in, and the place is a mess.
Yeah.
It's been abused. Phil?
Yeah, I guess that's the kind of point that I was trying to bring up before,
About?
when I mentioned about the roads, because
Timber road.
some of the newer members that are here, will we run into the time when you talk about a logging road and stuff, what happens is when you come in with a site plan, all of a sudden, the logging road seems to follow exactly this, and it's been expanded, and gravel's been, so it's technically constructed beyond the gravel, it's beyond the logging road. That's,
We discussed this plan for months, as I remember.
I wasn't on the board at the time.
Took a long time to get this one through because of a lot of issues with the setback to the river.
What about changes, Tim?
What I do know is if they did have to come back through the site plan process, I believe there are more strict shoreline protection rules in place, and they may not be able to get the number of dwelling units that they currently have approved or had approved when it was a valid site plan. I don't believe it's a valid site plan, but
Are we holding
I-
it?
that's what I'd like to hear from the board if you disagree with
Barbara?
that.
I'm familiar with the site. In my opinion, there has not been substantial work done towards this particular site plan. Additionally, it certainly wasn't done within the time frame after approval of the site plan. If anything, the work has been done in the last couple of years. So, and as far as I'm concerned, this site plan is done.
Dead.
I would concur with Barbara. Do we have any bond on this of any kind?
I don't believe so. I think that's a private road.
It doesn't matter what kind of a road it is. If
Well,
it's,
when you require a bond, it's typically for public infrastructure. It's not for
private.
private.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we need to take a vote on this, and do I have any other discussion on the issue here? We can call for a vote if we have no more discussion.
I beg your pardon, I actually missed what the actual issue was. I
Well,
don't think I was here for that.
I just like the board to kind of confirm for me that this site plan is no longer valid.
Signed in
And
2006.
that
So have they come
if-
back,
if-
or?
If somebody wants to
Nope.
come back in and develop this site as shown on here, they have to come back to the planning board and actually receive.
The property's actually flipped.
Another
It's
site
been
plan
sold
approval.
since this, and I think Brian just wants to make sure he gives people direction if they ask about it that we agree with.
Right,
Let's
you want
make
advice on what your attitude should be if somebody comes in and says, hey, by the way, I wanna throw 5 more houses up in here? Okay, okay.
They can use some of the data that's on the plans that we have, because the data hasn't
Be
changed. Would need to be updated, but,
Right.
but I would say a new plan would be in order for this site if someone wanted to develop this site.
Okay.
Anybody want to say anything different? Technically, by our rules, the plan is null and void, correct? By our rules?
Correct.
Fine.
Because of the time that has elapsed?
Because they have never come in for a time extension
Oh,
request.
okay, sure.
And it was signed in 2006, so we're going on many, many years.
If they had done a lot of work within a year, they wouldn't have had to come back in, but they hadn't.
Do you know the
Well,
site? Do
real
you know
estate
the
market's
site?
changed a little bit since 2006, so.
Do you know the site, Mark?
No, I don't. I'm not familiar with it at
should-
all.
It's just,
When you're leaving the village,
You would know it.
on your right,
there's a bunch of little mounds of dirt on that site. Just, I mean,
All right.
mounds and mounds and
I'll
mounds
have
of
to look
dirt.
at it.
You got a tractor for sale.
Okay.
It's right
You got a
next to
tractor
Glen
for
Lake. I mean, you'll see it.
It used to
you
be
know.
a site that had trees on it, and now all of a sudden it's open to the river.
oh,
It's a
yeah.
long, narrow piece.
It used to
open
be
Oh,
veg,
yeah, I saw
it
it.
used to be
Yeah.
vegetated,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
now it's a mess.
It's got one house on it.
right.
That was there.
2 or 3 story house.
The house was
The
always
house was
there.
already there.
Okay.
Okay, so, do we need to have a formal vote on this, Barbara, or Phil, or should we just,
Well, it's up to Brian.
Yeah,
I'm just
I don't
relying
know
on
that
past
you necessarily
experience.
have to vote on it. I just would kind of wanted to get the board's consensus on.
so the
What I
plan
should
is
be telling.
considered obsolete?
Well, let me ask a question. If we're here now, and we have this, if we don't vote on it, is it technically not obsolete?
I'll make a motion that the site plan approved on November 30th, 2006 for map 35, lot 35 is no longer valid.
Plan and valid. Seconded?
Second.
Seconded by John. Any discussion?
Yes.
Please.
If we set a precedent to vote for every expired site plan, do we have to do that in the future every time somebody misses the mark on a deadline? I think we're setting ourselves up by doing that, that every time a site plan expires, we have to vote that, yeah, it's expired. Whereas we have rules, written regulations that say if it doesn't meet this date, then by rule it's expired without a vote of the planning board, correct?
We've also had instances where that happened and they got their permits renewed, so it goes both ways.
How about if I amend my motion to,
By our rules.
no, to direct our planning administrator that upon inquiry, this site plan has expired. I get Richard's point, but that would be another reason to perhaps amend our rules of procedure and add something to it in regards to addressing plans, because
you like-
I actually think that would be a good thing to do, to have plans that are approved come back automatically for us in a certain time period, so we deal with it, because it does come up that we end up in limbo land 4 years down the road as to whether a site plan is any good anymore, when things have changed, and then it really is important. But anyways, that's
Would you like
another
to
point.
amend your motion?
I withdraw my second.
Okay. Do you really, do you need a motion?
I don't think so.
Okay, good.
You win.
It's not difficult to resurrect a site plan if it's been expired and somebody wants it to come and do the exact same thing other than just update it, correct?
Well, it depends, because if there have been changes in our zoning ordinances or state rules and regulations,
Yeah.
then
Density
you-
calculations.
Yeah,
then
okay.
it,
But it
Shoreline
would be less
protection.
difficult to do it if
That's
it's
why I
like-
called it
Right.
vesting,
But
because
it's
I
easier then to do
I
it
didn't
from
really
scratch.
feel like they were
Yeah.
far enough in to be considered vested.
It might mean they'd have to do quite a bit because of the laws have changed, you know? So it's a serious thing.
Can be,
It's a
right.
serious thing.
Yeah.
All right.
Do this.
Last item on the agenda tonight is Planning Board Rules and Procedures Adoption. It sounds like there's still more discussion on things. Do you want to tackle it tonight or move on?
I know that the changes that I have are brief.
I know Barbara wants to get this done tonight, but
Well then, why don't you go on, talk about your changes, please.
Okay, page 4, paragraph F, letter I, or 1, or whatever it is. It says 10, parentheses. It should be 10 days,
10 days
at
before?
least 10 days.
4 of 7?
Page 4, should say 10
least
days, not
10.
just 10. Okay, and then down in the II, just right below there, there's
a typo.
no, there's a typo, the least should say least, and I think, there should be some sort of, verb or something to help those verbs. Public notice must be published or posted,
Shall be
but something in there to to that effect?
No, I think it's
yeah.
because of, no, look at F. I think it's because it's just a notice, public notice, published, public notice,
Either
published.
published or posted, either of those. It's either published in the newspaper, or posted in the town hall where we're
Right, but the word, public notice must be published or posted in two public places. But that, because right now it just says public notice, published or posted,
He's right.
yeah, so
Okay.
you get.
What do you
my
want to add in there?
Drift,
I'll
must
just
be,
put must be.
Must
will be, shall be, whatever the correct.
No, must be, is what it is.
Okay, all right. Then page 6,
Should be shall, consistent with the one right
Should
above
be
it.
shall.
I'll put shall.
all right, I'll let the grammatologist figure that one out. Page 6, Article 10, all subdivision and site plans, instead of plan.
Say again, where is it?
Article 10, instead of
10.
plan, make it to plans.
Yep.
Article 11, planning and economic development coordinator, is that the same as the planning and zoning advisor?
Yeah, I
If
missed
it
that.
is,
I missed
fix that
change.
one, and then same thing down in number 12.
And after we adopt this, we'll change his official title, so they won't have.
Yeah. Yeah.
I am impressed.
But, so we
Please.
have those things coordinate throughout. Can I go on to page 7?
You can go like hell.
Please do, man.
Okay? Brian, you can just check the tape. Page 7, 2B, pluralize board to boards. Since we're talking about joint meeting, it needs to be boards.
To be, oh, the very
Boards,
last word of.
Yes.
Okay.
And then, number 3, I think when you say section 8, if you're referring to this document, you mean Article 8.
Is that the
Okay.
correct word, article?
That's what we use throughout this
Yeah.
document, article, so I think you mean Article 8?
Yep.
Okay. Those are my comments.
Good job,
Well
Richard.
done.
Pretty good, man.
See now,
Wow.
with
Check my
those
resume after.
comments stated very clearly, the board can still adopt it as.
Anybody else
amended
have any other
tonight
changes or,
with, as long as they
corrections?
agree with those comments? I mean, see?
anybody else have any other changes or comments here? Well, then I would suggest we vote on these, so we don't have to
I'll
look
make a
at them.
motion to accept as written with the comments I just made included, or something to
Do
that
you wanna
effect.
change your word accept to adopt?
Adopt sounds good to me.
Since that's the technical word.
Motion
for
to
it.
adopt.
Like I
I'll
said,
second.
Grammatology will take over.
Did you get that? Mark seconded it?
Got it.
You have any discussion on the rules of procedure with the noted changes?
I just wanna make one comment, I think this is a lot better than the other ones that when we first started.
Okay.
One more
Yes, sir?
comment. On Article 2, the name,
Article 2,
never mind, I had a wrong thought. Never mind, I'll withdraw. My second's still good though, let's vote.
where you want
So
planning
we're-
board in there?
I know, it's just,
We have,
I misread it,
we have a motion on the floor to adopt the rules of procedure as amended. Any more discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Chair votes yes.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Well, before I accept a motion, does anybody else have any other business before the board?
Can we have the board members all sign one of those so that we can, since it's got the signature line on the
Well,
front, and that way all the board
What
members
about all the
sign.
changes?
I'll-
I scratched them in my copy as you said them. You wanna use my copy?
Yeah, I'll adopt the behind portion, but if you sign the front page,
Here we go.
and
This one's got the corrections in it.
I can add.
Well, no, it
the
doesn't
other
matter, all he
pages
needs is a
behind.
cover page signed, that's what he's looking
Yeah,
for,
I'm
is a
just
cover
asking for the
page.
cover page
Who's got
signed.
the nicest, neatest cover page?
You do.
I just signed
Michael,
one.
thanks,
Oh, yeah,
Mine's
You
not.
wanna
the
pass
cover
mine
page?
around?
Okay, all right,
Who
mine's
got
gonna be
Mine's
faster.
not written at all. I don't need the cover.
No,
Mine's
you
all yours
ripped
on.
it,
Mine is
Oh.
clean.
you can't rip it.
I
You
need to
just
take the rest
ripped
of
it
this home,
off.
so.
Adam?
Okay, while we're signing, we'll just entertain a motion to adjourn.
It was made and seconded.
Made and seconded. All those in favor of adjournment, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Passed. Unanimous.